Chapter 185. Suicide. Dongqing also had a post-war recovery law, but some aristocratic families exploited and obstructed it, so it could not be implemented. Now, there were still conflicts between the countries. The southern man and the northern borderline were eyeing each other covetously. The war was almost on the verge of breaking out. All the knowledgeable people in the world had a consensus that the world was going to be in chaos again after a few years of stability. Thinking about the history of the 16 countries, and looking at the 5 countries that were not giving in to each other, Su Ke felt more and more helpless. People were like duckweed, drifting without anyone to rely on. The clear voice of the young man continued to ring in his ears, as if it had a strange charm that calmed people's hearts and souls. Young, strong men died on the battlefield. If the remaining women don't have the ability to protect themselves, they will be taken back by the northern borderline and the southern man and suffer all kinds of humiliation. If they don't have children continuously, they will be treated as 2-legged sheep by the livestock and be killed when they are hungry. Lang Jun, you mean? Although Su Ke was a man, he had longed for those extraordinary women in the previous dynasty for a long time and admired them wholeheartedly. Because of his admiration, it even affected his choice of future wife. His mother also had a great influence on him. She was a strong woman. Even if she lost her husband at a young age, she could still grit her teeth and raise Su Ke. She taught him how to be a man and provided for him to study. She was like the most common weed that would not be easily subdued despite the wind and rain and trampled on by pedestrians. He didn't dare to imagine that if he married a weak and graceful woman who was docile and beautiful, who also cried in the wind and screamed when she saw snakes, insects, rats, and ants. Then, when something happened to him, who would his wife and children rely on? Who else could they rely on? It was precisely because of this that Su Ke agreed with what Jiang Pingji said, even if it was a little off the mark. Su Ke vaguely understood and felt that this person really had the look of a wise ruler. However, he soon found out that it was all a lie. Women can also make such achievements. Why do they have to be tied up like canaries? Their wings can't fly, and they can only be used as decorations. Other than being admired, being a part of your wealth, giving birth to children, supporting your husband and children, there's no other value? Meng Hun did not interrupt, but he also shook his head in denial. Everyone had a daughter. If they gave birth to a daughter and raised her painstakingly, only to have her become a servant to another man, who could bear it? Meng Hun said, "As a father, I naturally don't like my own flesh and blood being treated so lowly." Su Ke was still a fledgling, but when he imagined his future, he found it hard to accept. A husband and a father were 2 completely different identities. Naturally, their perspectives were different. I don't think that's the point. The point is, it's such a waste of manpower and resources. Not only did they cripple him, but they also wasted his excellent combat strength. Women had the same battle prowess as men, so why did men have to go to war while women stayed at home? Why don't we go together? Su Ke and Meng Hun were speechless. They were dumbfounded. This was different from the usual way of stirring up love. So, from the beginning to the end, she had said so much, laid so much groundwork, just to say that women should stay at home and not go to the battlefield to waste their strength. This was the real deal, using women as men, right? Meng Hun coughed and tried to say something to ease the awkward atmosphere. Lang Jun is still young. There are many things you don't understand. He smiled. Su Ke immediately understood and turned her head away, unable to bear to look at him. Tell me, what do I not understand? Jiang Pengji felt that if they did not follow her script, she would be very embarrassed. Women, the reason why there are more women in the inner courtyard is that they, are born different from men. Meng Hun said vaguely. How could he explain to his little Lang Jun that women's physiology was different from men's? After their bodies matured, they would need Kuei water every month, and their bodies would become delicate. Pregnancy would take more than 9 months, and they would not be able to work normally. Even giving birth would be like walking through the gates of hell. Lang Jun was still young and inexperienced. Even if he explained it to him, he might not understand. That was a bit embarrassing. Meng Hun glanced at Su Ke. You are a scholar after all, so you should say something. Unfortunately, Suka was already looking at the sky and the earth, and he refused to look at his pleading eyes. Jiang Pengji was speechless. The two men thought that Jiang Pengji did not understand, but in fact, she already knew what they were trying to express through their mysterious eye contact. Because of the physiological structure, men were destined to be external, while women were internal. With the development of society, the social status of a latter would get lower and lower. If these words were said to people in ancient times, it would indeed be the case. But it did not make sense in front of Jiang Pengji. There is nothing in this world that is impossible. Jiang Pengji curled her lips mysteriously and said that out of the blue. Su Ku and Meng Hun stopped eye contact and looked at her. They did not know what she meant. Jiang Pengji obviously did not want to explain. We're going off topic. Anyway, Nongqin will be training with the troops in the farm. As for training tasks, you don't have to deliberately give her preferential treatment, and you don't have to relax the standards. Just do what you need to do. When the training is almost done, I will make other arrangements. Jiang Pengji didn't believe that they would lose to a group of weak fighters. She taught them with special attention. Meng Hun nodded, but he still wanted to protect her a little bit. After all, girls were different from rough men. That is not a problem. It is also a good thing that Lang Juan's maidservant wants to learn martial arts. At least she can protect Lang Juan. But they are rough people, and sometimes their mouths are not clean. If they are wronged, Meng Hun did not dare to say that he could completely avoid it. Jiang Pengji said indifferently, "It's okay. If someone says something dirty, Nongqin will just break a few of their teeth. If they could fight, they would use their fists to reason." Meng Hun was speechless. If his subordinates had such violent thoughts, Meng Hun would definitely say something. But the one who said it was Lang Juan, so he, up to you, up to you, up to you. After Meng Hun left to prepare, Suka suddenly thought of something and asked her a question. Lang Juan, you want women to go to the battlefield just because you think it is a waste of combat power? He deliberately emphasized the word just. Jiang Pengji suddenly smiled slyly and said, "Xiaoyu knows me well." Suka was speechless. He suddenly did not want to listen to what Jiang Pengji had to say next. He was afraid that it would shock him. But it was too late. The world values boys more than girls. Many families abandon their daughters and let them be taken away by wolves and tigers. Even if the children grow up, most of them are treated harshly. If the men in the family need money to get married or build a house, most of them will sell the girls cheaply. Suka felt that he did not need to listen anymore. Jiang Pengji wanted him to hear it. With the same amount of silver, one strong man could buy 2 girls and even have extra. Most importantly, it was cheap. She could build 2 troops with the same amount of silver. Suka was speechless, just as he expected. Chapter 186. These are all written by Lang Juan. I didn't expect Lang Juan to be so knowledgeable about troop training. Meng Hun held the training rules written by Jiang Pengji like a treasure. Suka was not used to Meng Hun's expression of admiration, so he gave him the original draft that Jiang Pengji had written before. The training content could be called torture by Su Ku. Naturally, it was inhumane. Meng Hun glanced at it and put it down quietly. He would rather read the revised version. "Coach Meng, if there's anything you don't understand, you can come to me at any time." Meng Hun was a tactful person. Suka handed over the work easily, so the mental preparation he had done before was not put to use. "Of course, I'll have to trouble Xiaoyu when the time comes." Meng Hun cupped his hands and smiled. He liked Suku a little more. Civil and military were 2 different fields. As a scholar, Suku was not familiar with training, but he was very meticulous in his work. Even though Meng Hun had never been in contact with this fledgling troop before, he had a rough idea after reading the content that Suka gave him. They were in the same camp, but they were not familiar with each other, so they did not talk about anything other than work. Suku was young, but he was talented and had a high level of comprehension. He learned a lot from Meng Hun's conversation. He was good at internal affairs, so he specialized in that area. He was very interested in the wartime food transportation that Meng Hun mentioned. As the saying goes, before the troops move, the food and fodder move first. A good logistics transportation line could decide the outcome of a war. His Longjuan's ambition was not limited to that. As the first member of Jiang Pingji's team, Suke could not lock his position as an accountant in the Luz. In other words, Suke had his own ambitions. They weren't small. At least, he wasn't just an accountant. Meng Hun did not hide anything since Suke was asking about it. He told him everything he knew and even the names of several books. As for how to find those books, it was not Meng Hun's concern. Of course, Meng Hun did not read as many books as Suke. He had the advantage of age and his own experience, which was valuable. Unknowingly, the two of them chatted until night fell. After a hasty dinner, they went back to work. Jiang Pengji went back to the Luz and took out her night clothes. Then she put the two books in a secret place in the woodshed. "That's good," she smiled. Everything was under control, which made her mood improve a lot. Her figure quickly disappeared into the night. That night, the gambling house was still very noisy. The gamblers did not care about the loss. They only cared about their own money and the money in other people's pockets. The boss of the gambling house was so angry that he almost vomited blood after Jiang Pengji cheated him of more than 4,000 taels of silver. Later on, he received news that the beautiful woman in the woodshed had been kidnapped by an unknown person. The hired thugs who were on duty at the gambling house had been seriously injured. When the old man heard this, he almost couldn't breathe. However, he had a tough life and was still alive. Even though he had suffered 2 critical hits, the boss would not close down because of this. This business, of course, had to continue. This casino was his property in Hejin County. If it was closed, how much silver would he lose in a day? The boss's face was ashen as he swallowed the blood and broken teeth. He hired a doctor to treat the injured thugs and bought some medicine. After giving them a small sum of money, he sent them home to recuperate. The security of the casino was temporarily handed over to the thugs who were not on duty that day. Big, 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 big. Small, 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 small. This time it must be small. Voices rose and fell one after another, filling the lobby on the first floor of the gambling house. The banker was smiling on the surface, but he was nervous on the inside. He opened the dice cup. 3 sixes. It was still a leopard. The dealer was a killer. At that moment, many gamblers who had lost their minds started to complain that there was a shady deal going on in the gambling house. Why is it a leopard again? This is the 3rd leopard tonight, right? I have lost 20 taels since I came in. The last one was 3. 1, and now it's 3. 6. Who would believe that there is no shady deal? That's right. The money I earned from selling 2 acres of land has been taken away. Faced with the ruckus of the gamblers, the banker sneered coldly in his heart. A bunch of fools. The gambling house was a place where gamblers were emptying their pockets. How could there be no shady deal going on? How could the dealer have won so many times without any shady deal? Weren't they stupid? The dealer saw that the gamblers were getting out of control. Some thugs came forward with sticks and threatened them. The hot-headed gamblers became as obedient as a quail. How could an ordinary person beat a thug with a thick stick with his bare hands? The dealer said calmly, "If you are unlucky, go pray to the god of fortune. If you lose, it's your bad luck. Don't blame the gambling house. What kind of place do you think the gambling house is? If you win, you lose. If you don't win, you have to be arrogant, right?" In fact, the dealer was also in a dilemma. He had lost too much money, and no one was making money. Even the stupidest gamblers would be vigilant. But what could he do? The gambling house had been cheated of so much money. The boss naturally continued to exploit the gamblers. In the past, he only occasionally pulled wool. Now, he planned to shave all the wool off the fat sheep. If you want to gamble, go. If not, get lost. The dealer waved his hand in annoyance. The gamblers looked at each other. In the end, no one left. They continued to hold on to the idea that they could make a comeback in the next round and earn back the money they had lost. They continued to indulge in this cruel trap. The dealer saw that they had surrounded the gambling table again. He snorted coldly in his heart. Despicable. The gambling house was still noisy and lively. The roars were mixed with the ecstasy of making money. It continued until dawn. Early in the morning, the leaves of grass were covered with mist. The city gates had not opened. Many people had gathered outside the city. Many of them had brought the vegetables they had harvested from their fields. With a creak, the city gates opened. The people began to line up and enter the city one by one. Thump, thump, thump. The crisp sound of horse hooves came from afar. The people at the end of the line were carefully counting the eggs in their baskets. These were laid by their big hen. They had saved up for a few days to gather these few catties. They were waiting to sell them at a good price at the market to subsidize their family. Get out of the way. The people had already moved aside when they heard the horse hooves. However, they did not expect the other party to be so arrogant. They did not stop at all. Ah, help! My eggs. Who stepped on me? It hurts, ouch. Chapter 187. Those who were lucky enough to escape fell to the ground, while the unlucky ones were trampled by the hooves of the horses. Immediately, a middle-aged woman was trampled on the left side of her chest. After the sound of bones breaking, her chest caved in. Blood flowed from her mouth, and she died. The guards at the gate noticed the commotion and stepped forward to stop it. The 20 or 30 strong men on horseback took out a token from their waists. Who dares to stop the Mangs? Let them in. Hey, they were so stubborn. The guards had seen arrogant people, but they had never seen anyone who dared to kill people on horseback and still dared to announce their family name. Even if they were from the aristocratic families, they still cared about their face. How could they be so arrogant and rude? Stop them. Stop them all. The head of the guards was unhappy. This kind of thing had happened so early in the morning, and several lives had been lost. If he let the murderer go just like that, he would be charged with a crime, and he would not be able to keep his position. I have never heard of anyone with the surname Meng in Hejin County. Arrest them. However, before the guards got close, the one who had trampled people to death on horseback blinded the guard with a whip. I am from the Mengs in Meng County, Sangzhou. How dare you? The Mengs? The Mengs, one of the 4 noble families in Dongqing and the real emperor of Sangzhou. The leader of the guard's expression changed several times. Finally, he forced a smile. Oh, I understand. May I know the reason why you have come? Breaking into the gate and trampling people to death. Did they really think that Hejin County was the same as Meng County in Sangzhou? Cut the crap and let us into the city. Otherwise, we will kill you. The whip in his hand cracked in the air, forcing the leader of the guards to take a step back. Just like that, the group of people casually rode their horses away. Above the gate, the soldiers had already drawn their bows and arrows, waiting for the order to shoot. The leader of the guards was livid. He raised his hand to stop them. If they were really from the Mengs, they would be in trouble if they hurt them. If they were not from the Mengs, they wouldn't dare to be so arrogant in Hejin County. However, they still had to send someone to follow them. Who knew what they were up to? Facing the people lying in pools of blood and hearing the moaning and groaning in his ears, the leader clenched his fists and punched the city wall in anger. Report this matter to the prefectural governor, then send the injured to the medical center. Record everyone's loss and those who died tragically. Send these to the prefectural governor and let him decide. The Meng family of Sangzhou, they've gone too far. Early in the morning, there were already wails and cries outside the city gate. Back to the other side. After the group entered the city, they immediately galloped on the streets. Fortunately, the market had not opened yet, and there were not many pedestrians, so it was easy to avoid them. Do you know where the Fulai Casino is? The leader stopped his horse in front of a passerby who obviously hadn't slept all night. The horse's hooves were raised high and almost fell on the man. The man was so scared that he was no longer sleepy. He felt as if he had taken a stroll through the gates of hell. His back was drenched in cold sweat. I know. Under the threat of the horse's hooves, the passerby was so scared that he fell to the ground. The passerby was the gambler who had gambled all night in the Fulai Casino. His eyes were bloodshot, his face was pale, his lips were pale, and his eyes were heavy. From afar, he looked like he was walking on air. You know? Good that you know. Take us there quickly, or you'll be whipped. The leader was overjoyed, and the dozens of strong men behind him also revealed relaxed expressions. They didn't expect to be so lucky that they caught a person just after they entered the city gate, and he happened to know the Fulai Casino. Thinking of Meng Liang, who had been missing for a long time, they couldn't help but feel nervous. They didn't want to escort him to Shangjing to hide. After all, Meng Liang's bad temper was well known. He was also a little lecher. Anyone who was targeted by him, no matter male or female, no matter how good-looking they were, could escape from his claws. The lucky ones survived, and the unlucky ones were beaten to death directly. Thinking that the family head, Meng Zhan, wanted him to be the heir of the family, many elders in the family felt a little disappointed. The Mengs was so glorious. If it was handed over to a playboy like Meng Liang, wouldn't it be over? How could he support a family with his little ability? In contrast, the eldest Lang Jun, who had no sense of existence, was more popular. Unfortunately, he was far away in Shangjing to study, and he wouldn't come back even once a year. He had almost no contact with the Meng subordinates, and he didn't even write a letter to his family. Thinking of this, people could understand. Meng Liang had a son who didn't even have a son. How could he be more likable than Meng Liang, who was sweet and filial? However, it was strange that they were both sons of the same mother. The second Lang Jun, Meng Liang, was useless, while the eldest Lang Jun, Meng Heng, was educated and polite. It was said that he was quite famous in Shangjing. He was going to be evaluated this year, and it was estimated that he would get a good result. Putting away the unnecessary thoughts, the leader threatened the gambler to lead the way. The gambler had no choice but to lead the way in fear. The knife on the man's waist was real, and the whip in his hand was still dripping with blood. He didn't want to die. Is this the place? After several turns, the group stopped in front of a gambling house. Standing outside, they could hear the clamor inside the house. Yes. There's only one gambling house here, called Fu Lai. Well, sir, can I go now? If he led the way for others, he could get some tips if he was lucky. But he was leading the way for this man, and it was good enough that he didn't lose his life. The gambler bowed. After getting permission from the leader, he quickly turned around and ran away as if he was being chased by evil spirits. Bah, coward! Behind him, a few of the attendants on horseback laughed, mocking the gambler's horrified expression and actions just now. Shut up. It's more important to find Lang Jun. The leader scolded in a low voice, got off the horse, opened the curtain, and entered the gambling house with his knife. There were about 20 or 30 people in the gambling house, all with knives. They were tall and burly, and had a strong aura. They seemed to be evil. As soon as they entered the hall of the gambling house, the whole space became narrower than before. The sharp-eyed waiter of the gambling house saw them, and his heart skipped a beat. Judging from their clothes and aura, they didn't look like they were here for fun. Could it be that they were in trouble? Thinking of this, the waiter had cold sweat on his back. He forced a smile and went forward to welcome the guests. Don't talk nonsense. Let me ask you, did you catch a young boy 2 days ago? The waiter's expression froze, and his forehead began to sweat. Chapter 188. Don't play tricks with me. Speak. Did you catch a very good-looking young boy here? The leader was experienced and knowledgeable. How could the waiter's thoughts escape his eyes? He immediately brandished his whip to demonstrate his power. With a loud crack, the sturdy gambling table broke into pieces. The gambler who could not dodge in time was whipped. In the next second, a frightening line of blood seeped through his clothes, scaring everyone away. There was only a broken gambling table left on the ground, and a gambler who was holding his waist, blood oozing out from between his fingers. If you don't tell the truth, I'll let you all have a taste of being whipped later. Let me ask you one more time. Did your gambling house capture a very good-looking young man a few days ago? Speak, did you catch him? The whip in the man's hand was extremely thick, about the thickness of 2 fingers of an adult. There were many fine and dense barbs on the long black whip. The tail of the whip was strung with more than 20 thin blades. With this kind of whip, it did not require much strength to whip someone until they bled profusely. If one used more strength, they might not even be able to withstand a single whip and directly die. The waiter was relatively close to the leader, so he could clearly see the blood dripping from the barbs on the whip. He was immediately scared out of his wits. This little one, the waiter originally wanted to be stubborn, but when his eyes met with the leader's, a kind of illusion of death assaulted him, as if his neck was being strangled by an invisible force, causing him to be unable to say the rest of the words. The other gamblers did not know what had happened, but they knew that the gambling house was probably in big trouble. They wanted to sneak away, but the leader's entourage blocked the door, looking as if they would not let him go until they got an answer. The waiter was unwilling to speak, but the other gamblers felt pity for their lives, so they naturally opened their mouths. 2 days ago, we did catch such a young boy. I heard that the boy is extremely beautiful as a fairy. His skin is exquisite, and his taste is also. The gambler was the first to speak, but before he could finish his words, he was already covered by the person beside him. The entire lobby was silent. Everyone could feel an invisible chilling atmosphere enveloping the entire place. Those gamblers were all ordinary people, and their bodies were even weaker than ordinary people. When had they ever faced such a murderous aura? He was so scared that his legs started to tremble. His knees went soft, and he knelt on the ground with a plop. He didn't feel any pain in his knees at all. What they didn't know was that the leader and his followers were also extremely shocked at this moment. They were so shocked that they forgot how to react. They were all adult men who had experienced sex and played with women before. Perhaps some of them had even played with men before. As for what the gambler had described, they knew very well in their hearts what kind of scene would happen. At this moment, there was only one thought in everyone's mind. It's over. It was indeed over. Who was Meng Liang? The Zongzi that Meng Zhan favored, the future leader of the Meng family, was now in a gambling house. It was so embarrassing. The leader's expression was incomparably gloomy, even turning ashen. He didn't dare to think about the storm they would have to face after rescuing Meng Liang. The waiter also wanted to cry, but had no tears. He had already realized that the kid he had caught earlier really had a powerful background. Now that they had come to ask for Meng Liang, it was obvious that he was a tough guy. How could a small gambling house resist them? The waiter said shakily, He really isn't here. He was released a long time ago. How could the leader believe that? He would rather believe that these people had evil thoughts about Meng Liang and locked him up in a small dark room. He waved his hand, and the 20 to 30 followers he had brought with him guarded all the entrances and exits of the gambling house, not allowing anyone to escape. Search! The order was given, and the demolition. No, the search began. The leader was like a stone pillar, standing where he was. He crossed his arms in front of his chest, and his resolute face was solemn. The waiter wanted to cry, but had no tears. The other thugs received the news and wanted to come up with wooden sticks. One of the followers pulled out a knife from his waist. Blood splashed, staining the gambling table and the scattered silver and gambling equipment. Everyone watched as the thug's arm was chopped off, and then the knife pierced through his chest. He fell to the ground with his eyes wide open in horror. Someone was dead. Blood quickly spread and filled the entire hall. The timid gamblers covered their mouths and vomited. The brave ones also turned pale, like a white wall covered with a layer of lime. Although the thugs in the gambling house were used to doing heartless things, they still knew fear. They only dared to seriously injure people, but they didn't dare to kill them. However, none of them expected that there was no lack of people like this in this world. The knives on their waists were all genuine and could take a person's life. The wait was especially long. One by one, the followers came up with a pale face, but none of them could find Meng Liang. Sir, our restaurant was indeed blind and caught that young man, but that very night, that young man had already been rescued. The waiter was trembling with fear, and his 2 skinny legs couldn't stop trembling. He didn't dare to tell the truth. If he told the truth and said that the young man disappeared on the second night after being caught, it would undoubtedly confirm the truth that the big mouth of the gambler had revealed. Could any aristocratic family endure such humiliation? If that happened, they would really be finished. Therefore, there were some things that they couldn't admit even if they were beaten to death. After a while, the followers came back one after another. The news was very disappointing. The last one was holding 2 scrolls in his hands. The scrolls were stained with dust. These 2 scrolls were found in a woodshed. Found this. Boss, please take a look. He had interrogated 2 of the thugs, and confirmed that the woodshed was where the gambling house kept the goods. Because he didn't dare to make a decision, he didn't open the scrolls to see the contents. The leader reached out his hand and roughly tore the neatly tied strips of cloth on the bamboo scrolls. He shook it open with one hand. He read 10 lines at a time. After he finished reading, the leader's face suddenly became darker and darker, as if ink was about to drip out. Everyone was trembling, afraid that it would say that Meng Liang was already dead. Of course, there was no such content, but it wasn't optimistic either. These people, kill them all. The leader's eyes flashed, and his murderous aura was obvious. After receiving the order, the other followers didn't hesitate. They all pulled out the knives on their waists and walked to the others. What were these people going to do? Whether it was the people in the gambling house or the gamblers, they were all scared out of their wits. Murder. One of the gamblers couldn't help it anymore. He wanted to run out the door, but his head was instantly cut off from his body. Blood splashed on the wall. At that moment, everyone clearly realized one thing. Chapter 189. What's going on? Jiang Pengji had just finished her breakfast. She meditated for a while and then turned on the streaming room. She greeted the audience as usual. On the way to the study room, she saw 2 servants whispering to each other by the rockery. One of them was crying and looked very sad. Her 5 senses were very good, but they were also troublesome. To deal with this flaw, Jiang Pengji would usually suppress her 5 senses to keep them at half the level of ordinary people. She was a bit far away, so she only heard some words like city gate, someone died, and someone was injured. The servants were all panicked when they saw Jiang Pengji. It was still working time, so how could they not be flustered when they were caught slacking? The Lu's had its own rules and regulations. After County Chief Lu came back, he became more strict and did not allow anyone to slack off. Don't be so flustered. Tell me, what happened at the city gate? Jiang Pengji faced the middle-aged woman who had been crying secretly. I'm not an unreasonable person. I won't blame you if you have a reason for chatting. The middle-aged woman grabbed her sleeves nervously and said sadly, This morning, my mother and father entered the city together. We didn't expect a group of strong men who claimed to be from the Mengs of Tsangzhou to break in. They rode their horses and injured people. My father tried to protect my mother, and one of his legs was trampled by a horse. Jiang Pengji's face turned serious, and the audience in the streaming room expressed their shock. Mingwei Tinya, oh my God, did I hear it wrong? Armstrong, why do I feel that all the people and things that the streamer has been in contact with recently are related to the Mengs? Ye Qingzhou, the Mengs are too arrogant. They even dared to break into the city gate. Do they want to die? Since your father was injured, I guess you must be anxious now and have no mood to work. Go to the cashier and get an extra month's salary to buy some nourishing tonics for your father. He is old and will not recover as quickly as young people. The servant heard that and suddenly burst into tears. She thanked Jiang Pengji repeatedly. After she left, Jiang Pengji looked at another servant who came to deliver a message. Her eyes turned cold. Come here and tell me what happened at the city gate this morning. Be as specific as possible. Jiang Pengji had expected Meng Liang's entourage to come, but she didn't expect them to come so quickly and so arrogantly. They even let their horses hurt people, and it seemed like they even killed them. It was a servant woman who came to deliver the news. She was a servant of the Lu residence, but she didn't live in the Lu residence. She usually worked in a secluded area in the outer yard and was very idle. After she was done with her own work, she still had time to gossip about the rumors in the marketplace. She could be considered the gossip center of the entire Lu residence. Although she wasn't present as a gossip girl, her storytelling skills were quite good. She narrated it vividly. Are you sure someone died? Jiang Pengji asked. Her eyes flashed with a hint of murderous intent. Her impression of the Mengs dropped by half. The servant woman gestured with her hands and said, That's right. There were more than a few who were trampled to death by the horse's hooves. There was also a beautiful girl who was of marriageable age and followed her mother into the city to buy some red hair ropes. Who would have thought that this would happen? Everyone says that the man surnamed Meng is the local tyrant of Tsangzhou. He can't even control the current officials. Now that I see it, it's true. Jiang Pengji glared at her coldly and said, "How dare you say something like that? Don't take your life." The maidservant came back to her senses and immediately broke out in a cold sweat. She quickly bent down and begged for mercy. "It's good that you have a long memory. Trouble comes from a mouth. It doesn't matter if you die or not, but don't drag the entire Lu residence into it." Jiang Pengji waved her hand and gestured for her to leave. "Since there's a reason for this, I won't make trouble for you this time. Don't leave your post without permission in the future." The bullet screen in the live stream room flashed past her eyes one after another. Some of them were like, haha, while others were like, oh well. Raising a chestnut. The host's behavior is typical. Only the officials are allowed to set fires, but the common people are not allowed to light lamps. I remember that she named the royal family of Dongqing by name. When the servant said so, she scolded her with a straight face, hoping that the maidservant would be traumatized. Raising a chestnut. If not, how can she be a match for the domineering host? Raising two chestnuts. The only host who is domineering and capricious but still not pleasing to the eye. Tang roasted chestnut. No. Now isn't the point that the Mengs are arrogant? They broke the city gate with horses and killed people. Obviously, there were viewers who were willing to understand the plot of the live stream, but only a few. Most of them were there to watch the host. The Mengs, Jiang Pengji, could imagine the bloody chaos at the city gate in the early morning just by simulating it in her mind. In the future, the first ones to be destroyed will be the Mengs. She suddenly opened her eyes, turned around, and left the Lu residence. She got on the carriage and asked the groom to drive her to Fulai gambling house. Before he could even get close, the stench of blood had already entered his nose. Everyone's blood was slightly different. People with a keen sense of smell could even distinguish a lot of information by smell, such as how many people had died and how long they had been dead. That was her level in her previous life. In this life, she had only fused a little, so she was not that good. However, based on her rich experience, the number of people who had died was definitely not less than 50. Jiang Pengji's face turned cold. She said to the groom, "Go a little further and see what happened." The coachman drove the carriage forward a little. A group of people surrounded the entrance of the gambling house. One by one, people dressed in bailiffs' uniforms carried out the corpses covered with white cloth. The blood had yet to coagulate, and it dripped onto the ground. Everyone's faces turned pale when they saw it. They were all killed. Jiang Pengji clenched her fists. At that moment, her expression was unprecedentedly cold. The system, which was one with her, wanted to reduce its sense of existence to zero, for fear that Jiang Pengji would think of it. No, I really can't stand the angry aura of the host. The almost stagnant atmosphere did not last long. Jiang Pengji loosened her fists and opened her eyes, which were clear and bright again. "Go and ask them what exactly happened." The coachman got off the carriage and asked. Jiang Pengji lifted the curtain. The bailiffs inside were still moving the corpses. One of them was carrying a large bag of bloody things. Fresh blood stained the coarse cloth and dripped down continuously. The bag contained the broken limbs of other corpses. Jiang Pengji was shocked. Actually, Jiang Pengji did not need the groom to ask. She could piece together a complete picture based on the discussions of the onlookers. A group of strong men in armor, with big knives at their waists and long whips in their hands, entered the gambling house. Not long after, the people inside were all dead. "Hey, you mean the killers and the group at the city gate? Are they in cahoots?" Someone said mysteriously. He did not dare to raise his voice, for fear of being targeted by the group of killers. They must be in cahoots. Someone saw them break through the city gate and go straight to this gambling house. A life for a life. These executioners should be executed. Chapter 190. Second Lang Jun, I've asked. The coachman came back and whispered to Jiang Pengji through the curtain to make sure she could hear him. After a while, Jiang Pengji asked, "Is there any sign of the Lu's residence in the carriage today?" The coachman was stunned for a moment, and then he answered, "Lang Jun, how can I disobey your orders?" Although he did not know why his Lang Jun suddenly requested not to take any carriages with the Lu's logo, the Lus were not poor. They had a few carriages for all kinds of banquets and trips. Okay. Jiang Pengji closed her eyes and said to the coachman, "Drive the carriage to Shi City first." Okay. The coachman whipped the horse, and it moved gently, bypassed the crowd, and went to Shi City. After Jiang Pengji left, there were a few strong men sitting on the second floor of the tea house opposite. The tea on the table was cold, and there was no trace of it being touched. They stared at the gambling house opposite them. They had been waiting for a long time, and there was nothing special. They were the Meng's entourage, and they were there to protect Meng Liang on his way to Shangjing. The person who was being protected like the moon was the leader. The man's eyes were fixed on a carriage that was moving away, and his eyes were filled with doubt. He called the waiter over and pointed at the carriage that was not far away. "Do you know which family it belongs to?" The waiter stretched his neck awkwardly. He tried to identify it for a long time, but he could not think of any familiar family. It was a very ordinary carriage. The workmanship and materials were common, and even a rich family could afford it. The waiter was confused. Didn't ordinary carriages look like this? There was no family emblem on it, so who could recognize it? Hejin was not a big place, but it was not small either. Those who could afford to take a carriage were as bright as the stars in the sky. He was just a waiter. It was good enough that he could recognize most of the family emblems of the gentry families. It was too difficult for him to recognize the carriage. He laughed awkwardly and said, "Sir, you are making things difficult for me. It is just an ordinary carriage. 9 out of 10 carriages in Hejian look like this. I really can't recognize which family it belongs to." At that moment, the group of people had taken off their armors. They did not recognize them for the time being. "Leader, what do we do now?" The leader did not speak, but his mind was still wandering. He raised his hand and asked one of his attendants to follow the carriage quietly to see which family it belonged to. He didn't know why, but he felt that something was strange. Most people wouldn't want to go near a place where a murder happened, except for those ignorant people who were not afraid of death. Was it not bad luck to die? Not to mention these families who could afford to ride in carriages. However, the leader had no choice but to give up when the attendant came back and reported to Jiang Pengji about the carriage. "Leader, I don't think that carriage is suspicious, and it's not Meng Hun's group in disguise." The attendant who followed Jiang Pengji around the West and East District had a helpless look on his face. "Then tell me, why did they stop?" the leader asked. The attendant was stunned for a moment and then stuttered, "I guess there are too many people watching the show, and they're blocking the way." The leader, yes, they were used to running amok in Sangzhou. They never had the concept of stopping for passers-by. They just ran amok. But this was Hejian County. In other words, he had thought that he was smart, but in fact, he was just being stupid. The leader's face darkened when he thought about it. Or rather, it was as dark as the bottom of a pot. "Leader, we've been here for a day, and we haven't found Meng Hun and his group. We can't catch them. What should we do now?" Meng Liang had been kidnapped by Meng Hun. It was definitely not a good sign. But the leader thought that Meng Liang was not dead, and he had a good reason. The leader said firmly, "Go back quickly and tell the master about Second Longjuan's kidnapping. We can't afford to delay." Some of the attendants were still reluctant to make the decision. "Leader, if something happens to Second Langjun, won't we be—" The attendant made a gesture of cutting his neck with his hand. He looked very nervous. Who was not afraid of death? The leader shook his head and said, "Second Langjun is definitely not dead. Meng Hun doesn't have the guts." Otherwise, the attendant asked seriously, "Why? Isn't it simple?" The leader opened the 2 bamboo slips and pointed at the one written by Meng Liang. He said with certainty, Haven't you noticed that Second Longjuan's writing is neat, clear, and steady? It doesn't look like it was written by a panicked person. In other words, Second Langjun must have been sure that he would not die. That's why he wrote this letter. But this Meng Hun is asking for 2,000 dawn of food. Isn't he afraid of being stuffed to death? 2,000 dawn of food was not a small amount. But food was not a big deal. As long as Meng Liang was alive and well, everything would be fine. "Leader, you're so wise." A few attendants flattered him one after another, their mouths uttering flattering and auspicious words of flattery. "So, now is not the time to be hesitant. We have to send these 2 bamboo slips back as soon as possible. As long as we can save Second Lang Jun, it will be a great achievement. Even if the master blames us, who doesn't know that Second Lang Jun's disappearance was because of his naughtiness? Even if there was a punishment, it would not be a heavy one. They would even be rewarded with a lot of money after the incident. Unfortunately, the leader thought that Meng Hun and his men would be impatient and come to check on what had happened in the gambling house. That was why he decided to wait on the 2nd floor of the tea house across the street. But after waiting for half a day, all the bodies in the gambling house had been cleaned up, but there was still no sign of Meng Hun. The leader said, "Pack up and get ready to go back to Tsangzhou. You guys, where do you think Hejian County is? That you can come and go as you please? Let's all go." A strange voice came from behind. The leader and his attendants were immediately alerted. They looked at the person who spoke. "Let's go. You killed someone here, and you still want to walk away? There's no such thing as a free lunch in this world." These people were all guards of the Hejian County Governor's office. Each of them had a knife at their waist, so they were quite capable. The 2 sides were in a stalemate, but a strong dragon could not beat a snake in its own land. The leader of the Mengs snorted coldly. He said arrogantly, "How can you catch me now? How are you going to send me back later?" Hearing what he said, the people of Hejian County were instantly filled with righteous indignation. They wanted to pull out their knives and cut them into pieces. Stubborn. The corners of the guard's mouth froze. He looked extremely indignant. Chapter 191. How much power did the Mengs of Tsangzhou have in Dongqing? The Hejian County chief had only heard about it before. Now that he had seen it with his own eyes, he was furious. What did they mean by he was just a small county chief with a title, but no power? What could a small official do to him? This is too much. This is too much. The Mengs of Tsangzhou are too much. The Hejian County chief was so angry that he flipped over the table. The fat on his body shook with his movement, and the mustache on his lips almost curled up. It was true that Hejian County was just a small county according to the size of the land and the number of people. But since it was a county, he deserved to be the Hejian County chief. How could he tolerate being humiliated by the servants of the Mengs? The guards of the Hejian County chief's manor, who had escorted the people there, also looked furious. The leader grinned hideously, raised his hand, and patted the shoulder of the leader of the guards. He whispered to him, "I told you how you brought me here and how you sent me out. Why do you have to humiliate yourself? Let's go." The leader waved his hand, and the 20 or 30 people swaggered out of the Hejian County chief's manor. They were extremely arrogant. In the distance, Jiang Pengji lifted the curtain of the carriage coldly and looked at the arrogant people quietly. They were like roosters who had won a fight. The audience in the streaming room did not witness the whole process, nor did they see how arrogant those people were in the Hejian County chief's manor. However, based on the words of the leader, many people said that they were too arrogant. If they had the ability, why didn't they explode on the spot? I don't agree with the streamer. I'm so angry that my lungs are about to explode. Even Li Gangsun was not so arrogant. The leader was just a servant of the Mengs. How could he be so arrogant? He would not even survive the 2nd episode in a TV series. Inja, to put it bluntly, not only did he survive the 2nd episode, but he also walked out of the Hejian County chief's manor alive. Ili Shabai. Alas, that's how the ancient society was. Power could crush people to death. Time passes between fingers. It's really annoying. Although I know that people's lives were worthless in ancient times, I didn't expect it to be so cheap. There were at least 50 to 60 corpses brought out of the casino. That was 50 to 60 lives. Pinshin Diawu. Oh, I don't agree with the saying that time flies. The correct way to put it should be the lives of civilians are like weeds, or even less than weeds. The lives of people with social status are precious. The atmosphere in the live broadcast room was a little quiet. Previously, when they stopped outside the gambling house, many viewers had already left due to the pressure. It was just that the queue for the live stream was always full. After a wave of people was pushed out, there would still be new people filling in. The number of people online had always been stable at 10,000. Jiang Pingji looked at it coldly for a while, and suddenly sent a message in the streaming room. Host V, are you guys afraid of blood? The viewers in the live stream were dumbfounded. Why did he suddenly ask this question? Could it be that his nerve reflex arc was too long? The next second, Jiang Pengji added another one. Host V, if you're not afraid, I'll teach you the right way to kill. For a moment, the entire live streaming channel was silent, and the bullet screen was empty for a long time. In just a moment, her vision was drowned by the overwhelming number of 660 SXS. Yeching Zhou, daily brainwashing task. Be impressed by the streamer's handsomeness, completed January 1st. Pianxian Diawu. Let's not talk about anything else. Just based on the streamer's straightforwardness, I have to give you a string of 666. Ili Sha Bai. Do you still need a leg accessory? You can shout 666 in all kinds of positions. The audience in the streaming room was almost boiling. Jiang Pengji's lips had a trace of sneer. If you're not happy, you'll fight back. Only a tortoise would swallow his anger. Let's go back first. The carriage's curtain was put down, and the coachman lightly whipped the rope. It didn't take long to get to the luge from there. Jiang Pengji directly asked someone to go to the stable and bring the horse over. I have to go out for some things. If father asks where I went, tell him I'll be back before the city gate is locked. Taking the reins, Jiang Pengji easily leaped onto the horse's back. She took a shortcut and avoided the crowded places. Jiang Pengji arrived at the city gate without a hitch. Seeing the indignant expressions on the guards' faces, Jiang Pengji calmed down. She murmured in a low voice, "It looks like they just passed the city gate. I should still be able to make it." The inspection at the city gate was not slow. She quickly took the reins and mounted the horse, rushing in the direction of the group. The war horse of the northern borderline was pure white. It had a well-proportioned and handsome body, was good at long-distance raids, and had a long endurance. It was a rare and famous horse. It was the first time Jiang Pengji had ridden it, except for the gathering. They should be right in front, but the terrain is flat, and it's easy to be exposed in a short distance. Let's take a detour and get ahead of them. Seeing the messy and deep hoof prints on the ground, Jiang Pengji's eyes flashed. She slightly pulled the reins and let the horse gallop in another direction. The group of more than 20 people naturally wouldn't expect that someone was following them, waiting for the best time strike. One of the attendants looked a little worried. He asked the leader, "If the master blames us for abusing the Meng's name, how can that be considered abusing? If it weren't for those people in Hejin County, we would have been at the next station by now." Second Lang Jun was kidnapped by Meng Hun and his gang. Now is the time to save him. Can they afford to waste such an important time? The leader didn't say anything. It was another attendant who spoke. It was not the first time that he had used the Meng's name for his own benefit. "Shut up, all of you. It's more important to get to the next station as soon as possible." The leader pursed his lips. He was anxious. Since the leader had spoken, the others didn't dare to say anything. They all lowered their heads and hurried on. Because of the delay, they couldn't get to the nearest station. The horses were exhausted and needed a rest. The leader looked at the sky and wiped the sweat off his forehead with his sleeve. "Let's rest here first." He sat on a small stool and rested. His whole body was covered in sweat. The others also looked tired. They had rushed to Hejin County after receiving the news from Meng Liang, but they were too late. Meng Hun had already kidnapped Meng Hun. In order to send the scroll back to Zhangzhou as soon as possible, they had to continue their journey. In other words, they hadn't slept for a day and a night. They wanted to go to the nearest station to rest and prepare enough food and water to feed the horses, but they still didn't make it in time. "Leader, we're out of water and food." If they had known this would happen, they would have restocked in Hejin County first. Now, they were in the middle of nowhere. It was too cruel. Just send 3 people out to look for him. Rest for an hour. Don't be late. Hejin County was surrounded by deep mountains. There were many ferocious birds and beasts. With their skills, it was easy for them to hunt small prey. On the other side, Jiang Pengji was hiding nearby. She could hear their conversation clearly. Chapter 192. Those horses are good horses. Why don't we take some? It's also a fortune. Jiang Pengji hid in the dark and carefully observed the group. When her eyes fell on the horses, she couldn't help but feel excited. Although those horses were not as good as the best horses, they had excellent bloodlines and belonged to the Meng stable. The Mengs was the only one among the four noble families that started with military achievements. They also owned the largest stable in Dongqing. Sangzhou was located at the intersection of trade routes, so it was very convenient for all kinds of business. The Mengs imported many famous horses from the northern borderline or the southern man. After several generations of breeding, most of the horses in the stable were of excellent quality. However, they only sold the inferior horses. The best and the best quality horses had to be offered to the main family of the Meng family or given to the Meng family as compensation to the army of the Meng family. The royal family of Dongqing wanted good horses, so they had to buy them from the northern borderline or the southern man at high price. By chance, they learned that the Mengs also had good horses, so the emperor hinted in various ways, hoping that the Mengs would offer a batch of good horses to him. What was the result? The Mengs did not take the emperor seriously at all. They offered a batch of inferior quality horses as a tribute, and bluntly said that the best horses from the stud farm were to be sent to the Meng's army. Not a single one of those good horses was allowed to flow out. This made the emperor of Dongqing very angry. However, the Mengs were indeed not to be trifled with. The emperor of Dongqing was already burning with anger, but he had to maintain an open-minded and hearty appearance. Jiang Pengji didn't want the horses at first, or she didn't even think about it. But their owner was going to die soon. Wouldn't it be a pity if she didn't accept them? As a good girl who didn't like to waste any resources, Jiang Pengji said that the horses were now hers. What if she didn't agree? Hold it in. He sent 3 experienced followers to search for food and water, while the others rested and recovered their strength. I heard that there are many bandits in Hejian. Do you think the 3 of them will run into them? They sat down to rest, and the attendants started chatting. Hey, as long as they're not blind, which bandit will give us trouble? Not to mention 3 people going out together. Even if there's only one person, which one of us from the Meng family army doesn't have the imposing manner to fight against 10,000 people? What's so scary about a few mobs? Don't you think so? At the mention of the Meng army's prestige, the attendants suddenly felt a surge of confidence. Indeed, in the whole of Dongqing and even the other 4 countries, who did not know of the reputation of the Meng army. They had guarded Sangzhou for many years and helped the royal family of Dongqing protect the vital parts of the country. Wasn't it all thanks to them that Dongqing was able to celebrate peace and prosperity? That's right. But in my opinion, the strongest among us is still the leader. Even that Meng Hun can't compare to you. A follower gently flattered him, and the group of people seemed to have received some sort of hint. Flattery flooded their leader like a tide. The corners of his lips couldn't help but curl up. His heart swayed, and he waited until he was satisfied with the feeling of floating on air before he reprimanded her with a stern face. The leader furrowed his brows and seemed to be very displeased. We're asking you to fix up now, not to gossip like a bunch of gossipy women. If you don't want to rest, then say so earlier. Meng Hun, haha, a stray dog who betrayed his master isn't qualified to compare to me. The leader is right. We were wrong. How can that hypocritical stray dog, Meng Hun, compare to you? One of the attendants quickly changed his words and flattered the leader with his glib tongue. This attendant clearly had a face full of righteousness, but his eyes darted around from time to time, looking extremely restless. When it came to flattering, he was more active than anyone else. The other attendants immediately followed up and opened their mouths to say, Meng Hun is not qualified to compare to the leader. If you want to compare, throughout the whole of Dongqing, only the Count of Jinbei's residence is qualified to compare to the leader. I heard that they were beaten up in the northern borderline again. In my opinion, if the leader was the leader with your talent, you would definitely be able to turn the situation around and beat those bastards in the northern borderline back to their grandmother's house. After hearing this, the leader was in a good mood, as if he was shouting a piece of ice in the hottest days of the year. His whole body was icy cold. The few of them talked about everything and flattered the leader. After a quarter of an hour, the 3 attendants from before still hadn't returned. Of course, they couldn't come back. The three attendants were experienced in surviving in the wilderness, but compared to Jiang Pengji, they paled in comparison. She quickly found the nearest water source and laid an ambush, waiting for the three prey to take the bait. Soon, the three figures came together. One of them said in surprise, "There is water here. You're the best. Don't talk anymore. Fill the water bags first." The three of them were carrying many empty leather water bags. If they were to fill all of them and bring them back, the weight would not be light. Jiang Pengji looked at them coldly and squatted down beside the pool. She steadily raised the bow in her hand. She took out 2 arrows from the quiver and quickly drew the bow to a full moon. Swoosh, swoosh. The 2 arrows sank into the brains of the 2 attendants, piercing through the back of their heads. They were instantly killed. The third person was originally seriously filling the water bag with water. Suddenly, he noticed that the surface of the water beside him was dyed red with eye-catching blood. He was slightly stunned. The 2 companions who were talking and laughing with him just a second ago opened their eyes wide in disbelief and fell head first into the pool. Enemy attack. 2 words suddenly popped up in the mind of the third person. The water bag in his hand fell to the ground and wet the soil by the shore. He jumped up abruptly and pulled out the broadsword from his waist. He vigilantly looked around. Following the direction of the arrows, he did not see any traces of anyone. How many enemies were there? Where were they? For a moment, these 2 questions popped up in his mind. The more he thought about it, the more nervous he became. He tensed up and stayed on guard for a long time. Still, no one attacked him. It was as if the 2 arrows that killed his companions appeared out of thin air. The person looked at the bodies of his 2 companions and nervously pursed his lips. Then, he gritted his teeth and staggered away. Ye Qingzhou. Host, you let it go just like that? Letting a tiger return to the mountain will cause endless trouble. Gimme I. Although I think killing is very bloody, the host situation is a special case. You can't generalize. Letting the enemy go is harsher to yourself. That person went to inform the others and called everyone over. Can the host deal with so many people alone? Muyu Qingfeng. I want to convince myself that the host can kill more than 20 people, but the host is still a bean sprout, right? Lu Lanting's body was only 12 years old. Compared to the burly men who were 7 feet tall, she was as petite as a white rabbit. Just the difference in physique alone made the viewers in the streaming room nervous. They could not help but break out in cold sweat for Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji did not care about the fish that escaped the net. Naturally, her target was not just 2 people. Chapter 193. Host V. Don't worry. Letting 1 fish go is just to attract more stupid fish. She sneered, leaped up, and landed on the dense tree trunk. Her footsteps were light as she walked away. The enemy was in the light while she was in the dark. She always had the initiative. Thanks to the high mountains and deep forests in Hejin County, it was very convenient to hide. Besides, Jiang Pengji knew how not to leave any traces. She shuttled through the forest freely like a dragon in the sea. Bad news. Bad news. Leader, there's an enemy attack. The surviving follower ran towards the crowd in a panic. He almost couldn't catch his breath. His lips were pale, and he kept muttering, "Enemy attack. 2 of our brothers were killed just now." What? Enemy attack? And 2 of our men were killed. The leader suddenly stood up from the small stool, took 2 steps forward, approached the surviving follower, and said sternly, "What enemy attack?" The follower gasped for a while, and finally could barely tell. "Just now, I was fetching water with the other 2. Suddenly, 2 black figures flashed by and attacked us with arrows. We were careless, and the other 2 were shot in the head, and they died." Died? The leader's eyes widened in disbelief, and then he became violent. The people he brought were killed by a sneak attack outside. It must have been done by the bandits near Hejin County. They were really bold. Then you came back just like that. The surviving follower's eyes were red, and he said in a tearful voice, "Leader, I also want to fight those 2 beasts to avenge my brother, but I still have to save my life, so I came to report to my brothers. My brother's life can't be lost in vain." If others were to find out that our Meng family army was ambushed and killed by 2 bandits, where will we put our faces? The leader listened with a gloomy face and his hands clenched into fists. He suddenly took out his whip, and he was full of anger. These mobs have gone too far. The leader gritted his teeth, and then he ordered 20 people, "Let's go to avenge our brothers." Jiang Pengji's 5 senses were no longer suppressed, and she could hear their conversation from this distance. She couldn't help but laugh. The audience in the streaming room could also clearly hear their conversation with the help of the system. Suddenly, there was a sea of 2,333. Gumimi, you have a big imagination. You said it as if you saw it with your own eyes. He doesn't even know where the streamer is, and he said he saw 2 black figures. Is it just because the streamer shot 2 arrows at once? That's ridiculous. Lao Sijiliaming. If the streamer makes 3 consecutive kills later, shouldn't they say that there were 5 people who attacked them? Mu Yu Qing Feng, they have to say that. If they don't make the situation more dangerous, how can they explain that they were so scared that they peed their pants and left their brothers' bodies and ran away? He was still too young. If he was a little more thick-skinned, he might have directly bragged that there was a platoon of bandits watching him, that he was skilled in martial arts, and that he had broken through the encirclement left and right, and finally escaped. Everybody lift chestnut together. I'm impressed by the comment above. Jiang Pengji waited in a good mood. Although she was not used to using ancient bows and arrows, it was the same as a sniper. Compared with a sniper, she preferred to move from one place to another after shooting. Bows and arrows could not be compared with a sniper rifle. The former's speed and destructive power were too small. Squatting in the same place was simply telling the enemy where she was. Host V. Lao Siju Lianming. I think your suggestion is acceptable. Jiang Pengji drew 3 arrows from the quiver, raised the bowstring to a full moon, and did not move. She squinted her sharp eyes, waiting for the best opportunity. There were 5 people left to guard the horses and luggage. They seemed to be standing loosely, but they were actually very alert. The young man who had survived was left behind. He ran in a panic and accidentally fell twice. He looked very embarrassed. His companion comforted him. Look at you. 2 bandits scared you so much. Look, hasn't the leader already brought people over? If the leader goes out, not to mention 2 bandits, even an entire bandit stronghold will be wiped out by him. The surviving follower was still shivering. His forehead was stained with 2 pieces of mud. Blood mixed with the mud. He smiled reluctantly and was about to look up to thank her when a shadow blocked the sun above his head. The next second, a warm weight fell on him, catching him off guard. Warm, scarlet blood dripped onto his face and almost into his eyes. Whoosh! Jiang Pengji could not shoot 2 arrows at the same time because of her position. It was difficult to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, so she shot continuously at a very fast speed. Enemy, enemy, enemy attack. The attendant raised his hand and pushed away his companion, whose brain had been pierced through. His vision was restored, but there were 4 more corpses around him. Before they could react, they had already passed away. The horse that was quietly nibbling on the grass did not panic at all, nor was it frightened. It was as if the 4 arrows that took their lives just flew out of thin air, without a trace of murderous intent. Jiang Pengji glanced at the follower's almost collapsed expression with satisfaction. Her eyes darkened, and she turned back to the previous pool. At that moment, the leader had brought people to the pool where the incident happened. 2 bodies were floating alone. Blood stained the water, and the 2 arrows that had pierced through their brains were still hanging on them. The leader's face darkened, and he asked people to go forward and fish up the bodies. He raised his hand and pulled out one of the arrows, not caring about the colorful liquid splashed on his body. He turned the arrow over and did not see any special personal marks on it. It seemed that it was really done by bandits. The leader pondered and said, "Go check around and see if there are any traces of other people's activities." After a search, the result was regrettable. It seemed that the 2 people who attacked them were ghosts without feet. There were no other footprints or traces of other people's activities on the ground. The leader did not believe it and went to check for himself. It was true. At that moment, someone could not help but murmur in his heart. They said they saw two shadows. Could be ghosts? Shut up. How could there be ghosts in broad daylight? Although someone refuted, everyone was still a little scared. At that moment, a cold wind blew through the forest, making their scalps numb. Leader, we can't find any evidence here, and there are no traces of other bandits. Should we continue to search? The leader broke an arrow. It seemed that he could not understand why there was no trace at all. How did the other party do it? Ghosts. Haha. Only mediocre people would believe that. The leader did not give up and checked again. In the end, he had no choice but to go back. A total of 28 horses were still in their original place. If they were robbed at that time, they would suffer a loss weight. Chapter 194. Just as he finished speaking, an arrow pierced through the air, directly piercing through the chest of a person who was standing relatively far away. Ugh! A muffled sound rang out, and everyone looked towards the source of the sound, just in time to see the man raising his hand to cover his chest, a look of disbelief on his face. They saw his burly body slowly fall backwards, blood flowing out from his completely shattered heart, staining the ground red. Before he died, his eyes were still wide open as if he had seen a malicious ghost. The scene was creepy. Could it be that there were really malicious ghosts in the forest? Don't panic. You are a man. Why are you afraid of ghosts? The leader shouted, which brought everyone back to their senses. He raised his sword and walked a few steps toward the direction where the arrow came from with a gloomy face. The grass and shrubs could not withstand the sharpness of the sword and were chopped down to the ground. No, still no trace. Or was the ambusher hiding? The leader looked at the ground where there was no trace of a living person. His expression was like a wall with a few cracks. Ah, another scream was heard. Another man was pierced through the chest by an unknown arrow. The direction of the arrow was far away from the leader. The leader hurried back and saw that the man was dead. Just like the previous man, he was shot in the heart and died. He checked the wound and could no longer control his violent emotions. Since he began to work for the Mings, he was used to being flattered and flattered. When had he ever been humiliated like this? He was toyed with by a bunch of nobodies who came out of nowhere. What was even more hateful was that the other party had never revealed themselves from the beginning to the end. Playing tricks on us. We don't need to be afraid of them. The leader stood up and said to the others, "Are you all stupid? They pointed their arrows at you, and you didn't feel it all. You are still standing in twos and threes." The leader's scolding made the others tremble. They did not dare to be so careless and spread out in twos and threes. Instead, they formed a more orderly formation. Compared to the unknown malicious ghost, the leader was more terrifying. Seeing that, Jiang Pengji had already quietly moved to another place. How stupid. It doesn't feel challenging at all. Jiang Pengji smiled. The enemy was in the light while she was in the dark. She had the initiative in her hands. Regardless of whether the enemy gathered in a group or dispersed in twos or threes, it was all useless unless they could feel her breath or detect her murderous actions in advance. Killing aura seemed illusory, but it really existed. It was just that it couldn't be touched or seen. Some martial artists worked hard to train themselves and improve their five senses. They would vaguely develop a mysterious intuition. When others stared at them, they would feel it, not to mention the killing intent that was filled with malice. The leader was indeed capable. His five senses had also reached such a level that he could sense the killing intent and stares of others. However, how could Jiang Pengji's standard be the same as theirs? A genetic warrior whose killing intent could be sensed by others was already the worst of the worst. It was simply impossible for him to participate in a mission. Jiang Pengji also had rich experience in sniping and killing. She succeeded every time. If she could not perfectly restrain this killing intent and reduce her presence by 100%, according to the five senses of the people in the future, it would not be called a sneak attack. It would be telling the enemy her position and trying to kill them. Then what was there to play? The audience in the streaming room was watching excitedly. It seemed that after the shock of seeing blood for the first time, they had calmed down. "Wanyue, Hashtag laughter cry. I have a deja vu of a high-level golden godly outfit massacring the novice players in the novice village. Ace Huahua. It's obviously a godly character who has ascended to immortality. Zhongfei Xingqian of last night. It's better to be crushed. It feels good. I like the feeling of killing a bunch of small monsters with one slash. Jiang Pengji curled her lips. Huddling together would only make them die more quickly. Host V. I'll show you what it means to kill two birds with one stone. As soon as she finished speaking, the arrow had already pierced through the air. Jiang Pengji changed to another place without looking back. Swoosh! An arrow pierced through the air. The crowd only noticed its existence when it got close, but it was too late. Another two. Jiang Pengji did not have to look to know that she had taken down two more enemies. At that moment, the number of casualties had reached a terrifying number. They did not see the shadow of the ambushers from beginning to end, but their companions fell one after another. The leader was safe and sound in the middle, but the two people who had been killed were very close to him. They fell in the direction of the leader. With such archery skills, they can't be bandits. The leader pushed the body that fell on him away. A trace of unwillingness flashed across his face. However, he also knew that if they continued to stay in the dense forest, they would only silently lose more people. Could it be the people in Hejian County seeking revenge? One of the followers guessed with fear. The leader snorted coldly and said contemptuously, "Those people don't have the guts to—" If this was not the case, that was not the case. Then who was the culprit? Could it be that a malicious ghost really appeared in broad daylight? For a moment, everyone was in a state of panic. Seeing them retreat, and then looking at the reserves in the quiver, Jiang Pengji's smile was somewhat evil. Since they had already set foot on the road to hell, how could they escape? It was not difficult for Jiang Pengji to shoot while moving. The only difficulty was that she had to pay attention to hiding while moving. The atmosphere became more terrifying and gloomy. The tense atmosphere and the shadow of death shrouded everyone's hearts. Dong, the head of one of the followers who fell at the back of the group, was pierced through from the temple by an arrow. He was directly nailed to a tree trunk not far away. What are you panicking for? Retreat. The leader heard the strange sound at the back of the group. His heart suddenly sank. He knew that another life had been quietly taken. The same scene happened one after another. Jiang Pengji was like the most experienced hunter. It was as if she had thoroughly understood the dense forest. No matter how the group of people ran or panicked, she could maintain a fairly safe range. She was like an experienced cat, and those people were the mice that she chased. She destroyed their psychological defenses bit by bit. When she was done playing with them, she would kill them with one blow. The leader was about to have a nervous breakdown after being shot one after another. Even though he looked calm on the surface, he still could not hide the guilt in his heart. Yes, guilt. He couldn't sense where the arrows were coming from, and he didn't know what their target was. Chapter 195. No way. It couldn't go on like this. The only way was to leave the dense forest and go to an open area. When there was nothing to hide behind, he wanted to see how the enemy would attack. In this regard, Jiang Pengji could clearly tell the enemy that those who deserved to die would still die. It had little to do with where they died. It was not easy to escape from the dense forest. Originally, he had brought 20 followers with him, but now there were only 2 left. The closer they got to the exit of the dense forest, the more frequently Jiang Pengji shot. Seeing that they had escaped, any normal person would feel relaxed. It was also the best opportunity to attack. However, when the leader brought the remaining 2 survivors to the place where they had rested, what they saw were 4 bodies lying in a pool of blood. The leader's eyes were wide open, and his fierce look scared the 2 followers who followed him. The only survivor was the follower who had gone to fetch water and was lucky enough to survive. Why? Of the 5 people who stayed, 4 were dead, and only this one was alive? Of the 3 people who went to fetch water, 2 were dead, and only this one was alive? The anger in the leader's heart could no longer be suppressed. He strode forward and grabbed the follower's collar. "Tell me, did you kill them? Tell me, are you a spy for those villains? Did you deliberately lure us there? The leader glared at the follower, who had been scared to the point of delirium. His face was smeared with sticky blood. The audience in the streaming room was speechless. Wait, what kind of weird development was this? Why did they suddenly have internal strife? No, internal strife was internal strife. Why did they suspect that the unlucky guy who had been scared twice by the streamer was the murderer? Fengji Liao Yuan. Haha, I feel sorry for him. First, he was scared twice by the streamer, and now he's suspected to be the murderer. Shuang Xiang. Sorry, really very sorry. No, I laughed so hard that my stomach hurts. Did the leader become a stick? Lao Siji Lianmeng. I bet a spicy stick. This is definitely an Easter egg left by the streamer on purpose to test their intelligence. It was no wonder that the viewers in the live streaming channel were so happy. This turn of events had shocked everyone. The followers around the leader were all brought here by himself. He knew everyone's background, so it was impossible for there to be a spy. Of course, it was also possible under extreme circumstances. Some viewers in the live stream room were mocking him, but naturally, there were also people who had different opinions. Chestnut is delicious. Am I the only one who thinks the leader's reaction is normal? After being scared by the streamer so many times and seeing the people around him die one after another, the psychological pressure was unimaginable. Under such circumstances, it was impossible to maintain a normal level of thinking, and they would definitely subconsciously suspect the most suspicious person. Who was the most suspicious person at the moment? It must be the survivor. Putting himself in their shoes, if he was one of the members of the team, facing a completely clueless enemy, and every time the enemy attacked, one member of the team would definitely die, and no one would know if he or she would be the next target. The fear of death lingered in one's heart. The Grim Reaper's footsteps were hot on one's heels. Even a person with a strong mental defense would collapse in an instant under such a dense frequency of attacks. However, from God's perspective, the leader's judgment was indeed laughable. At this time, the audience in the live broadcast room was silent, and then they agreed to speak. Not to mention anything else, they just said that the host had too much bad taste. Jiang Pengji smiled. Her bad taste was yet to come. Tell me, did you kill them? Tell me. The leader grabbed the other's collar and roared as he questioned. At the same time, Jiang Pengji steadily raised the bow, drew an arrow, and aimed at the target. Swoosh! In the next moment, blood burst out and covered his face. His neck seemed to be strangled by an invisible hand, and it forcibly stopped him from speaking. That's bad taste. Jiang Pengji snorted coldly, and another wave of 666 flew by in the live broadcast room. My host, you're amazing. Jiang Pengji was too lazy to struggle with the last few shrimps. She raised her hand, put her finger to her lips, and whistled. The horse neighed, and the sound of hooves came from afar. A vigorous white figure galloped out of the dense forest. The other horses seemed to be summoned, and they all ran toward the white horse. The scene was chaotic. Game over. Jiang Pengji drew her bow for the last time and killed 2 birds with 1 stone. She took the lives of the 2 people beside the leader. She had said that 1 messenger was enough. Let's go. Pack up and go home. The white horse galloped toward her. Jiang Pengji smiled, ran 2 steps forward, and jumped on the horse's back. The pure-blooded warhorse of the northern borderline was indeed worthy of its reputation. Only then did the leader see who had ambushed them. Just as he was about to draw his bow and shoot an arrow, the horse galloped wildly, kicking up a cloud of dust and blocking his line of sight. All he could see was the buttocks of the horse and the small figure that had already become a small dot in the distance. Oomph! The leader was so angry that he threw the bow and arrow in his hand to the ground. None of the 27 followers around him survived. Who is it? That's too much. The leader spat out these words through gritted teeth, and a smell of iron spread in his mouth. The only thing he could be thankful for was that his horse had a good relationship with him, and it was not affected by the white horse. Otherwise, he would have to walk to the next station with an empty stomach. In the future, I will take revenge. Jiang Pengji did not care whether he wanted to take revenge or not. You Even his life was deliberately spared. If it were not for the messenger, he would have died and gone to hell to show off his arrogance to the king of hell. Jiang Pingji hung up the bow and put the quiver back. She leisurely sat on the horse's back and let the white horse walk around as it pleased. She led a group of brothers to look for food. The horses were intimidated by the white horse's imposing manner, so they all became obedient. It seems that you are the king of horses. Jiang Pingji saw that and patted the horse's neck with a smile. The horse responded with a loud snort. Its beautiful and smooth mane swayed slightly with its movements, brushing against her wrist and making her feel a little itchy. What a proud little girl. Yes, it was a mare, but it was more hot-tempered than any stallion. It liked to kick its hooves at the slightest provocation. Jiang Pengji carefully counted the number of horses. There were exactly 27 of them. Host V, this is a big win. It seems that robbing the enemy to help me is good for my health. What do you mean by robbing the enemy to help me? Host, your worldview has fallen to the ground. Do you want to bend down and pick it up? The viewers in the streaming room said that they had lived for a long time, but they liked Jiang Pengji's carefree and unrestrained behavior. So, their worldview had been led astray by the host. Chapter 196. Jiang Pengji jumped down from the horse's back. The white horse was very understanding. It rubbed her cheek affectionately and then ran to the side to nibble on the grass. I wonder when I can eat pears. Looking at the pear trees by the banks of the Yishui River, Jiang Pengji took a deep breath. Her nose was filled with the fresh fragrance of pears. At this time, no one was holding a gathering on the bank of the Yi River, so there was no one on the bank at all, except for the constantly moving horse butts. Jiang Pengji walked straight to the shore. She kicked off her wooden clogs and took off her socks. She dipped her feet into the water and sighed. A cool feeling spread from the tip of her toes to the rest of her body. Jiang Pengji placed her hands on the stones by the river and leaned back slightly to look at the sky. Shushu loves lowly. I was quietly lurking, but the host's feet blew me out. Lao Ciji Lianmeng. I think this is today's benefit. The foot control group is blessed. Lucy was, after all, a spoiled child. Whether it was riding a horse, shooting a gun, or running, his skin was always a little delicate. Now his feet had a few red blisters burning hot. When he touched the cold river water, he shivered in comfort. Looks like I still need to practice more. It's not good to get blisters so easily. Jiang Pengji was bored. She used the tip of her foot to stir up ripples on the surface of the water. When the blisters were no longer so hot and uncomfortable, she prepared to go ashore. However, before she could pull her feet out of the water, she found a tall young man in a lake blue, scholarly robe standing not far away. He looked to be about 18 or 19 years old, with skin as delicate as flawless porcelain, bright eyes, red lips, and white teeth. His thin, moderately thick lips were curved. This was a face that easily gave people a good impression. It seemed that he was smiling at everyone. However, at this moment, the young man pursed his lips tightly with a hint of anger. The bunch of people in the live streaming room who were obsessed with looks started to shout again, and all kinds of flattering comments flooded the bullet screen. Durian-flavored milk. I can't take it anymore. I can't take it anymore. What a beautiful young man. Ah! Although I know that ancient times were very cruel and dangerous, the moment I saw this young man, all those hardships go to hell. Ko Jiaoqi fan. I'm not convinced. Why were the ancient people so good-looking? Didn't they all say that they were ugly? Host Jingjeng Shanghua. Although the host is my true love, the moment I saw the young man, I wanted to climb the wall. Such bullet screens almost blocked Jiang Pengji's vision. In the end, she had no choice but to block some of them. Jiang Pengji looked around and confirmed that there was no one else but her. Did that mean that the young man was angry at her? The young man's porcelain-like face showed a little anger. He looked at her accusingly, as if she had done something infuriating. No, what else had she done other than soaking her feet and raising more than 20 horses? Could it be that those free-range horses went to take advantage of him? Just as he was puzzled, a bullet screen in the live broadcast room inspired him. Ace Hua, Haha, by the way, is that handsome young man drinking water downstream? It seemed that he was quite angry. Jiang Pengji was speechless. She lowered her head to look at her feet that were still soaking in the water. She then raised her head to look at the young man's almost red face. She was speechless. She was to blame. She calmly put on her socks and wooden clogs. Jiang Pengji whistled, and the big white horse galloped over. Behind it, there were a total of 27 well-proportioned horses of different colors. Obviously, the big white horse had become the leader of the horses. Jiang Pengji didn't even need to deliberately drive it. Jiang Pengji murmured, "Nowadays, horses are becoming intelligent." She sat on the horse and glanced at the young man who was still standing in the same place. She moved the reins and signaled the big white horse to go over. Jiang Pengji sat on the horse and bowed to the young man. "May I know your name?" The young man was very tall, but he was still a head shorter than the big white horse. When the big white horse lowered its head and snorted at him, the young man hurriedly stepped back with a bit of panic on his face. Seeing that, Jiang Pengji patted the horse's neck and signaled the little girl not to bully him on purpose. "Judging from your clothes, you don't look like a local." The young man calmed down and looked at her with mixed feelings. After a while, he bowed back and said, "I'm from Langi. You can call me Hanyu." Hanyu? What about his courtesy name? Jiang Pengji subconsciously thought of this question. After all, the ancient people's naming habits were really annoying. But then she remembered that only close friends or elders could use courtesy names. She narrowed her eyes and asked, "My name is Lu Shi. I'm a local of Hejian. I saw you staring at me just now. Do you have any difficulties?" The young man's face became even uglier when he heard the question. Jiang Pengji laughed in her heart. The audience in the streaming room complained that she was too mean. Hanyu was choked by her straightforward question, but he couldn't just say that he just drank some water to quench his thirst. Hanyu's face became even uglier when he thought of that. He had no choice. His water bag was empty, and there was still some distance to go into the city. He could only fetch water from a spot. He didn't expect that someone would soak her feet in the water. Should he be glad that she was not using the toilet? Hanyu lowered his head subconsciously and looked at Jiang Pengji's feet, which were wearing socks. He felt a little uncomfortable in his stomach. Jiang Pengji said again, "I was rude just now. My feet hurt a little because of the long journey. I just soaked my feet for a while and found that you were looking at me like that. I thought that the horses around me provoked you. Did they do anything to you?" Hanyu's pale face looked much better after hearing that. His white cheeks became rosy again. "The horses didn't make fun of me. Are they war horses?" Hanyu said. He glanced at the horses that Jiang Pengji mentioned. He seemed to find something, and his pupils slightly shrank. "I don't know if they're war horses, but they're definitely good horses." Jiang Pengji smiled and stroked the mane of the big white horse. The horse rubbed against her palm intimately and licked it from time to time. "I took Whitey out for 2 laps and let it go to find food by itself. I didn't expect that it would bring back so many horses." I was also very surprised. Hanyu was very surprised. He looked at the big white horse with sparkling eyes and said, "This horse has a well-proportioned body and strong hooves. Its eyes are full of intelligence, and it has a ferociousness that normal horses don't have. Is this a good horse from the northern borderline?" "It should be. My father specially sent it to me. It is said that it is a good horse that was carefully selected from the royal horse farm in the northern borderline." Jiang Pengji said, "I don't know much about horses, but Whitey is full of intelligence. It seems that it can understand what I said. In the whole family, I'm the only one who is close to it." Jiang Pengji's words were really shameless. Chapter 197. Compared to the white horse, Hanyu was more concerned about the other 27 horses. They were from the Meng's horse farm. Horses of such quality were usually provided to the Meng's army. Outsiders couldn't buy them. Now, there were 27 more horses, which made Hanyu feel a little uneasy. So, Hanyu asked, "Do you know who the owner of these horses is?" Jiang Pengji sneered. She never asked for the names of people she killed, and there was no need to. They were all dead anyway. But she said, "I don't know. Do you know?" Hanyu said with certainty, "This is a fine horse from the stable of the Mengs in Sangzhou. Only those with a high status in the Ming's army are qualified to own such a fine horse. Lu Langjun is in trouble, Jiang Pengji said carelessly. Why? It's just a few animals carrying people. How can they kill people? Han Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He suddenly put on a serious face and said, not only will they kill people, but they will also implicate the whole family. Is it that serious? Han Yu saw that she didn't believe him, so he explained the stakes to her very seriously. Don't doubt me, Lu Langjun. There was a tragedy in Meng County in Sangzhou. Someone stole a horse belonging to the Mengs, and the whole family was involved. They were trampled to death on the horse farm. I didn't steal these horses. They came here by themselves, Jiang Pengji said seriously. But what you said reminds me of one thing. These horses are indeed easy to get into trouble. I have to find a way to get rid of them as soon as possible. Han Yu was speechless. Jiang Pengji smiled coldly. Langjun, you said that I'm a thief. Since I've already taken the blame, why don't I just sell all the horses and make some money? No matter how angry the Mengs are, they have to find me first. Han Yu was alert and smart. He immediately understood why Jiang Pengji's attitude toward him had changed so much. He immediately apologized. You don't have to be so angry, Lu Langjun. I used that tragedy as an example to tell you to think twice before you act. The Meng family is powerful and arrogant. Ordinary people can't fight against them. I have no intention of slandering you for stealing. Jiang Pengji tightened her grip on the horse's belly, and the white horse took 2 steps forward. She said proudly, it doesn't matter. Since I dare to accept these troublesome little fellows, I naturally have my own reasons. Seeing her like this, Han Yu didn't continue to insist. Maybe she really had the right to be arrogant, and he would only annoy her if he tried to dissuade her. The two of them had only met by chance, and there was a misunderstanding at the beginning. Naturally, there was nothing much to talk about, and they soon parted ways. The livestream viewers felt that it was a pity. It was rare to see such a handsome, sunny boy. It would be a pity if they did not lick his boots for a while. To avoid encountering people who knew about horses, Jiang Pengji took a shortcut and leisurely let the white horse carry her to the farm. Wow, what a big horse! So high. The children in the village had never seen so many horses. A bunch of naughty children came forward, their faces full of curiosity. Everyone wanted to reach out and touch the horse's hooves, but Jiang Pengji didn't allow it. War horses were hot-tempered. If they accidentally angered one of them, they would lose their lives if they were rewarded with a hoof. Langjun, Jiang Pengji jumped off the horse. Xiaoyu, you came just in time. Ask Coach Meng to bring the horses into the farm. Remember to tie them all up. Suka thought that was not the point. The point was, didn't Langjun always say that he was very poor, and that he needed to be thrifty here and there, even to the extent of losing his mind? So, where did he get the money to buy so many war horses? Even though Suka didn't know much about horses, he still had the basic insight. He didn't know how good the horses were, but he knew that they were indeed excellent. So, where did Langjun kill people and set fires? How did he get so many? Suku accidentally blurted out what was on his mind. Jiang Pengji tilted her head and stared at him, which made his hair stand on end, as if he was going to explode in the next second. Unexpectedly, Jiang Pengji just nodded seriously and said, Xiaoyu, you know me best. Suka was dumbfounded. The viewers in the live stream almost burst out laughing. Although he was not as handsome as Han Yu, Suku was still very handsome. Langjun really killed people and set fires. Suka didn't know how to react. However, when he saw Jiang Pengji's half-smile, Suku suddenly realized that something was wrong. I killed people, but I didn't set fires, Jiang Pengji said seriously and added, setting fire to the forest is a serious crime. In Jiang Pengji's era, wood resources were scarce. Only the rich and the aristocratic families could afford pure wood furniture. In order to protect the decreasing forest resources, the relevant regulations were introduced. Setting fire to the forest was a serious crime, and it could lead to death. Suka heard that and felt slightly relieved. No, he didn't set fire, so he couldn't kill people. At that moment, he carefully counted the number of horses. Minus the one that belonged to his Lang Jun, there were 27 left. 27? Thinking about the number and the killing that his Lang Jun said, he seemed to understand something. Anyway, I took them from the Mings. It doesn't cost me anything. Jiang Pengji raised her hand and patted Su Ke's shoulder. But the horses raised by the Mings have special marks. People who know horses can easily recognize them. This is going to be a problem. Before Su Ke could react, Jiang Pengji had already made a decision. Find a way to sell them. They can probably be worth a lot of money. Sell the horses. Su Ke's mind flashed with the approximate market value of the horses. Horses used for transportation were usually not cheap, and a horse like this was worth dozens of times more. But, won't it be a pity, men always had some characteristics that never changed no matter what time it was. For example, men in Jiang Pengji's era had a special love for mechas. Some people even joked that mechas were men's true love. In this era, men seemed to be like this as well. They had a unique love for strong and healthy horses. Jiang Pengji said, I can keep them, but I don't think it's necessary. I killed those lackeys of the Mings and only left one alive to report back. If they know that these horses are in my hands. Su Ke was suddenly shocked and immediately sobered up. He was still very rational when it came to his personal interests and interests. If that's the case, we'd better find a way to sell the horses as soon as possible. It's fine even if the price is lower. We can't keep them and cause trouble. Su Ke had already started to calculate in his mind how much money and food the horses could bring them. Yes, but I don't know how to sell them. We'll need to find a slightly more professional person. Jiang Pengji smiled. The Mings were a jinx to others, but they seemed to be a blessing to her. Chapter 198. According to Jiang Pengji, it would be better to sell the war horses so that the Mings wouldn't trace them back to her. Su Ke even started to make a budget, but Meng Hun put forward a different opinion after he heard about it. I don't agree with your decision. The loss is too great. Meng Hun licked his dry lips and looked at the plump and strong war horses with a burning gaze. For a general, a horse that they liked was like a second companion. It's better to hide them in the mountains for a while and wait for the Mings to die down before plotting other things. Jiang Pengji focused on the first sentence. How great is the loss? Meng Hun said, for example, a good war horse like this is worth 70 to 80 taels of silver. That's the price of fair deal. If you sell it to a horse dealer privately, they will buy it at a much higher price. Usually, they will reduce the price by 40 to 50%. That much? Jiang Pengji asked. That's at least a horse dealer with a conscience. If they bully someone who doesn't know the trade, they will be even worse. War horses are different. If they have internal injuries, they will be worthless. That's why they are more expensive. But if they are sold privately, the price will be reduced even more. Meng Hun sighed and raised his hand to stroke the mane of a maroon war horse. The horse was strong, and the muscles under his palm were tight and full of strength. It was fascinating. Su Ke was in a dilemma. It would be a loss if he sold them, but it was too risky to keep them. Even if they were hidden deep in the mountains, they would still be found. Jiang Pengji looked down and thought for a while. I'll listen to you this time. Anyway, we got them out of nowhere. No matter how we deal with them, it won't be a loss. We will need to train riding and shooting in the future. With them, at least we don't have to buy extra horses. It will save us a lot of money. Su Ke asked, but if that's the case and someone finds their tracks and suspects, Jiang Pengji reacted quickly. When she agreed to Meng Hun's suggestion, she already had a solution in mind. It's not difficult. I originally wanted to move the troops training from the farm to the mountains, Jiang Pengji said. Jiang Pengji said, but not now. Find a way to hide these horses. It doesn't matter if they are exposed. The Mings can't do anything to me. Jiang Pengji smiled innocently as she spoke. After all, I'm just a powerless aristocrat. How could I have ambushed 28 of them, killed 27 of them, and left one alive? Isn't it more believable to say that Meng Hun did it? Su Ke almost couldn't hold back the smile on his face. Before Meng Hun joined the team, you could trick him, but now that he was a friend, you still want to trick him like this? Do you have any shame? What was eye-opening was that Meng Hun actually felt that it made sense. That's true. Ordinary people would definitely think so. Although the young Lang Jun is skilled in martial arts, how could he be compared to the followers of the Meng family? These horses are in your hands. You can say that you bought them from a horse dealer in the black market. What can the Meng family do to you if they want to settle accounts with you? Meng Han gave a simple and honest smile. If an ordinary person told the Meng family this, he or she would definitely be in trouble. But Jiang Pengji had someone to rely on. It was just 20 horses. The Meng family didn't lack them. What they lacked was an excuse. What they lacked was face. Jiang Pengji's reason was reasonable. Would the Meng family dare to go against the Liu family for 20 horses? If that's the case, these horses can be kept in the mountains. But they are hot-tempered. It's better to find someone who has experience in raising horses so that they won't get hurt. Jiang Pengji made the final decision. Meng Hun's smile deepened. 27 horses. No matter what, he could at least get one, right? The maroon horse next to him was not bad. Both its appearance and temperament were to his liking. Suka saw that and secretly put his hand on his forehead. He had a headache. His Lang Jun killed and robbed people without saying a word. Even though it was the Meng family that was robbed and killed, his Lang Jun was born in a noble family. The Liu family didn't lack anything. Why? Why did his Lang Jun become such a gangster? Meng Hun next to him was the same. He was fine before, but now he seemed to be affected by his Lang Jun. No. How long had it been since they hooked up? The speed of their influence was too fast. Suka looked like he had nothing left to live for. He watched Meng Hun call people to take the horses away. The food that these war horses usually eat should be different from that of ordinary horses, right? Meng Hun said, of course. They eat more carefully and more expensive. The veins on Suka's forehead bulged. Those horses were all masters who needed to be served. Alas, I hope the books will be sent to the Meng soon. Otherwise, Lang Jun won't be able to keep them. Suka was in charge of the accounts. He knew the financial situation best. They still needed the support of the Lius. The entire troop, including 40 to 50 mouths and 27 horses, was counting on the Mengs. Meng Hun was speechless. One was marked by the company one kept. Maybe Meng Hun was not the only one who had changed. Suka had also become more shameless. Their family's Lang Jun was really poisonous. Feng Huaiyu, you made me look for you so hard. Feng Jin planned to find Jiang Pengji that day. He didn't expect to hear a familiar voice as soon as he got into the carriage. He opened the curtain. Hey, it was an acquaintance. Wenbin. Feng Jin got out of the carriage. The joy of meeting an old friend flashed across his young face. Why are you here? They greeted each other, and Feng Jin welcomed the good-looking young man in a lake blue scholar's robe into the door. I was preparing for the assessment. I wanted to invite you, but I didn't expect your third brother to tell me that you accompanied the fourth prince to Hejian. It's not far, so I took a detour. Maybe I can meet you. I saw you from afar as soon as I entered the city. The young man had a bright smile on his face. He was not as reserved as ordinary people. His eyebrows were full of vitality. Feng Jin smiled bitterly. Wenbin, you came at the right time. Do me a favor. What's wrong? Han Yu raised his eyebrows and smiled. Are you entangled with some passionate girl? They were friends who grew up together, and they were the same age. Feng Jin let go of his usual calmness in front of Han Yu. Look at you. You're getting more and more improper. I really don't know how Master Yuan Jing taught you. Feng Jin patted Han Yu's shoulder and whispered, the fourth prince likes to hang out in the brothels, but he calls me out every time. I can't stand it. Could it be that the fourth prince is interested in Huaiyu's beauty? Han Yu had an indescribable expression on his face. Feng Jin coughed and lowered his voice. Of course not. I don't like to go to those brothels. He didn't like to go there, but he was called out to go there. It was okay to refuse him once or twice, but he refused him every time. Even a fool would know something was wrong. Chapter 199. Han Yu raised his eyebrows and teased. So, what do you want me to help you with? He doesn't know you well. If he wants to drive you away, just pretend that you don't understand. Wu Ma Jun went to the brothel every few days to make friends with Lu Shi. He He liked to invite Feng Jin along every time. Now that Hanyu was here, Feng Jin had an excuse to get away. You should have just rejected him directly. What can a useless fourth prince do to you? You were just trying to save face, Hanyu said carelessly. Feng Jin was not valued, but he was still the second son of the Feng family. If he didn't want to do something, Wu Ma Jun couldn't force him to do it. Feng Jin smiled bitterly. A leopard couldn't change its spots. It was his nature, and it wasn't easy to change it. Wu Ma Jun was annoying, but Feng Jin didn't want to offend the fourth prince yet. There was no need to make it ugly. Hanyu still had the same temperament. I haven't seen you for a few years. I thought you would be less temperamental after you became Master Yuanjing's disciple. I didn't expect it to get worse. Your temperament is quite similar to the good friend I've made recently. Perhaps the two of you will get along well. Hanyu raised his eyebrows and said with interest, There are not many people who could be praised by you, Feng Huayu. Not to mention that his temperament was similar to his. She is a wonderful person. Feng Jin thought of Jiang Pengji, and the smile on his face became wider. Hanyu was quite surprised. TSK. Could it be that the good friend Huayu is talking about is actually a beautiful lady? Is she your confidant? I think you asked me to help you get rid of the fourth prince so that you could have some time to meet your confidant. His smile was so sweet that Hanyu felt like he was going to be blinded. Feng Jin's smile became more and more helpless after hearing what Hanyu said. Although his good friend was indeed a woman, she was not a confidant. He didn't know what Hanyu was thinking about. Of course, it's not a wife, and it's not a close female friend. It's a good friend. Wenbin can't slander Feng Jin's style just because of his experience. I originally wanted to introduce the two of you to each other, but now that I see that you have a big mouth, I think it's better to forget about it. Feng Jin and Hanyu were good friends who grew up together. They were as close as brothers and would occasionally make some harmless jokes. Hey, don't. He must be a rare young talent to be praised by Huayu. I want to get to know him. Only then did Feng Jin let go of Hanyu. If Wenbin had come a little later, I'm afraid I would have gone to find Lanting. Hanyu couldn't help but be interested in the Lanting that Feng Jin had mentioned. He wanted to see what kind of talent Lanting had. As a student of Master Yuanjing, Hanyu had seen too many young talents who claimed to be gifted by the heavens. One or two of them tried to be Master Yuanjing's disciples, but what was the result? It was either an exaggeration or an unworthy name. There were only a few people who could catch Hanyu's eye. Hanyu said, It's not too late to visit now. Feng Jin hesitated for a moment before nodding. All right, because of the addition of Hanyu, Feng Jin specially wrote a visiting card. Otherwise, it would be too rude to bring someone he didn't know directly to his door. Unfortunately, the concierge told Feng Jin that his Lang Jun had been away for some time. Did Lanting say when he would come back? Feng Jin asked in a good temper. The gatekeeper thought for a moment and said, Lang Jun only said that he would come back before the city gate is locked. Before the city gate is locked? Looking up at the sky, it was obvious that he couldn't wait any longer. If that's the case, I'll have to trouble you to tell Lanting that I've been here. The gatekeeper said respectfully, It's no trouble at all. Lang Jun is my Longjuan's good friend. This is what I should do. Feng Jin had no choice but to return to the carriage. Han Yu was playing with the jade tassel hanging from his waist with his fingers. Are you not at home? Feng Jin nodded. He thought for a moment and said, Since you are here, why don't you go to Yaoji? Yaoji? Another strange name. It seemed that Huayu had made a lot of good friends while he was away from Shangjing. Feng Jin saw the confusion in his eyes and explained, Yaoji is my good friend. Her name is Lu Heng, and she is also Lanting's cousin. Hanyu said bluntly, Since I have nothing to do, I might as well go there. Feng Jin shook his head with a bitter smile at Hanyu's attitude. With Wenbin's temperament, if he encountered any setbacks in the future, he would suffer a lot. Jiang Pengji didn't come back until an hour before the city gate was locked. She rode a tall horse and slowly returned to the Lu's house. As soon as she came back, she heard from the gatekeeper that Feng Jin had come to see her. Huayu? Jiang Pengji asked. Did he leave any other message? The gatekeeper thought for a moment and shook his head. Lang Jun only asked me to tell you that he had been here. He didn't say anything else. Oh, I see. Jiang Pengji felt relieved. It seemed that it was a normal visit, and he didn't encounter any difficulties. But the gatekeeper hesitated. What? The gatekeeper stammered. The one who often goes and goes with Feng Langjun has come to see you again. Jiang Pengji, try not to think too much. What did he mean by always goes with Feng Jin? It felt like there was an affair going on between them. Did you say that Wuma Jun came again today? Since the last time at Ingshun House, the frequency of Wuma Jun's visits was frighteningly high. But Jiang Pengji often went out, so she didn't run into him. The gatekeeper said awkwardly, "Yes, I heard from other servants. He seems to want to marry the second Yangzi." What? Marry the second Yangzi of the Lu's house? Jiang Pengji was stunned for a while. Then she remembered that there was a sister who had never shown her face in the Lu's house. However, her stepsister was not even 9 years old this year, right? Didn't Wuma Jun want to marry Jingxian? Why did he change his target to his sister of concubine? Or could it be that this person wanted both of them? Jiang Pengji's eyes turned cold. She pursed her lips and looked extremely unhappy. After returning to the house, she went straight to see Lu Shi. He was reading some documents seriously. "Lanting, you're here." Lu Shi put the book aside and smiled. "Sit next to me." Jiang Pengji asked directly, "Father, what do you mean?" If Lu Shi had not hinted or misled Wuma Jun, he wouldn't have known that there was a daughter of a mistress in the Lu's house. For some reason, although the siblings were in the house, they were scarily invisible in the eyes of others. It was obvious that someone had done it on purpose. Lu Shi asked, "What?" "There is a rumor in the world that Wuma Jun wants to marry my sister." Lu Shi said, "It's not a rumor. I did agree to it." Jiang Pengji, "Lanting, I swore in front of your mother's grave," Lu Shi said. "I won't let those who hurt her and this family live a good life. But my sister," Lu Shi said meaningfully, "I only have your mother in my life." Jiang Pengji suddenly understood. The children in the house were not Lu Shi's biological children. If that was the case, she couldn't help but look at Lu Shi's head. Chapter 200. "Father, you mean?" "My sister." Jiang Pengji withdrew her gaze. She did not want to be too obvious and hurt his dignity as a man. "It's just a grudge between the previous generation. I'll tell you in detail when everything is settled." Lu Shi caressed her hair and said gently, "You don't have to listen to the intrigues in the backyard. You don't want to dirty your ears and change your temperament. Did you agree to marry my sister to Wuma Jun to avenge my mother?" Jiang Pengji asked. At the same time, she was deep in thought. If that was the case, there must be something special about this stepsister's identity. "Yes, it's a very important part." Lu Shi's lips curled into a sinister smile. It was as if there was a cold lake deep in his eyes. "I wanted to wait a few more years, but Wuma Jun came to me on his own. He must have some ulterior motive. I'd like to see his expression when he finds out the truth. It'll be interesting. She killed Amin for her own ambition. She should pay the price." She asked, "Who killed my mother?" Lu Shi did not answer her. He sighed and said, "I told you. It's a grudge between the previous generation. I don't want you to be involved. I know where your ambition lies. The world is vast, and that is your goal. I, your father, will settle the score for your mother." But Jiang Pengji felt that things were not that simple. Lu Shi was hiding an important truth. "If you want to do something for your mother, then promise me." As Lu Shi spoke, he leaned forward and whispered in her ear word by word. It was as if he was making a solemn vow. "Don't let anyone get their hands on the throne of the world. You can only win. You can't lose." Jiang Pengji's heart skipped a beat. Even though Lu Shi had learned some things from Master Liaochen, it was the first time he told her that she had to win. She asked in a low voice, "Will the person who killed my mother fight with me?" Lu Shi couldn't give a very clear answer to this question because he didn't know the details. The only thing he could say was, "I don't know, but if you want to be the ruler of the world, it won't be wrong. Who cares if she will fight with you? She won't be able to beat you. Just remember today's conversation in your heart. Even if you are talking in your sleep at night, you must not leak even half a word. You must not leak anything." Even though Jiang Pengji didn't mind Lu Shi's serious advice, she had to take it seriously. "What's more?" Lu Shi smiled sarcastically. "How could someone who only knows how to suck up to you compete with you? What does she rely on? tossing and turning men's bodies, seductively asking for sex. It's the biggest joke in the world. A woman? Jiang Pengji was surprised. She thought Lu Shi wanted to deal with a man. Lu Shi obviously didn't want to talk about this topic anymore. His daughter was too cunning. The more he talked, the more information he would leak. Before the situation became clear, he didn't want to dig up the past. Lu Shi wouldn't be worried if she was getting stronger. But now, it was clear that it was still not in its infancy. It still needed to recuperate and accumulate its foundation. Lu Shi was in no hurry. He had waited for so many years, and he didn't mind waiting longer. As long as he could see that woman's head fall to the ground before he died, everything would be worth it. Your sister's matter is settled then. Lu Shi's voice was calm, but there was a hint of chilling pleasure in it. Jiang Pengji was not a compassionate person. Lu Shi had already hinted that his sister had a special identity. If she continued to speak up for her, it would seem a little stupid. But didn't father say that Wu Ma Jun and Jing Xian? Could it be that he wants to enjoy the bliss of having two wives? Lu Shi said, let him worry about it. In any case, Wu Ma Jun would not let his stepsister become his concubine. It was even more impossible for the daughter of the Wei family's first wife to become his concubine. Naturally, Wu Ma Jun had to cancel the marriage. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to leave Hejian County alive. On one hand, he promised Lu Shi to marry his daughter, but on the other, he wanted to take Wei Jingxian's engagement. Wasn't he courting death? But, father, Jing Xian and I have broken off our engagement. The Wei family is interested in marrying Wu Ma Jun. Although they didn't say it officially, some well-informed people know about it. Now, that Wu Ma Jun has changed his mind. Doesn't the Wei residents have any objections? Lu Shi was a little surprised. He did not expect his daughter, who had been so insensitive before, to think about this. Don't worry, it's just gossip. The Wei residents did not admit it. They just need to say that others guessed wrongly. Lu Shi smiled and said, have you forgotten that there was another person at the gathering other than Wu Ma Jun, who was of equal status and had a brighter future? You mean Feng Jin? Jiang Pengji thought of her good friend. Feng Jin is the second son of the Feng family. His father is the head of the Imperial Secretariat, Feng Ren. He comes from a noble family. Isn't he better than a prince who is not favored and feared by the government? It is said that the daughter of the Wei family should be married to someone of high status. The daughter of the Wei family is barely a match for him. Jiang Pengji did not expect such a plot twist. Will it work? It's in the bag, Lu Shi said calmly. Marriage is about matching two surnames. If it is fated, it will happen naturally. Jiang Pengji was speechless. But you're on good terms with Feng Jin. If he really marries the daughter of the Wei family, it may affect the relationship between you two. No matter how they broke off the engagement, Wei Jingxian would always be labeled as Lu Shi's ex-fiancée. Feng Jin knew that their relationship was pure, but a man's mentality would always be a little stiff, especially when Feng Jin and Lu Shi had more contact in the future. They would visit each other, and Lu Shi would see the married Wei Jingxian. He was afraid that Feng Jin would think too much. Jiang Pengji only wanted to touch her forehead and say, how overthinking. This was not the era where everyone was gay. Seeing two people of the same sex getting along well, one could speculate that they were in an impure relationship. Lu Shi did not know that Feng Jin had long known that Jiang Pengji was a girl. Anyone who married Wei Jingxian would feel disgusted, but Feng Jin would not. Jiang Pengji said with certainty, that won't happen. Huai Yu is not an ordinary man. She was not worried that Feng Jin would feel disgusted, but she was worried that Wei Jingxian would. If the two of them were fated to be husband and wife, she would have to keep a distance from Feng Jin. She could not cause a family conflict, could she? But for now, she did not have to worry too much. Nothing was set in stone yet. Lu Shi praised. Feng Huaiyu is indeed not simple. It was a pity that the son of the Feng family was destined to not be on the same path as his daughter. Chapter 201. Lu Heng and Feng Jin were friends. In the past, when they met, they would talk about everything under the sun or exchange opinions on politics. Now, They had another topic to discuss: Lu Heng's cousin, Feng Jin's good friend, Lu Landing. The former had a secret brother complex, while the latter admired Jiang Pengji and treated her as a best friend. They had a lot to talk about. At first, Han Yu was just listening to them out of boredom. But after a while, he became more interested in the lanting they were talking about. When Lu Heng heard Feng Jin say that Han Yu was Master Yuanjing's disciple, he couldn't help but be in awe. He looked at Han Yu with even more enthusiasm. His cousin was going to Langyi to study. If he could find out Master Yuanjing's preferences earlier, it might come in handy. With this in mind, Lu Heng tried to get more information from Feng Jin. Han Yu's lips curled into a smile, and he gave Feng Jin a meaningful look. Feng Jin smiled bitterly. He guessed that this was probably what Lanting meant by Brother Khan. Lu Heng had good intentions. He would just pretend that he didn't see it. I can understand that Yaoji loves her brother. It's just that teacher has already taken in his full number of disciples. I'm afraid he won't be taking in any more. Han Yu shook his head regretfully and said, "But Langyi Academy still welcomes you. If you go to Langyi in the future, you can be my classmate." This time, Feng Jin, who was watching from the side, was surprised. Already full? Master Yuanjing has found the fourth person he has been looking for? This time, it was Lu Heng's turn to be confused. Why couldn't he understand what these two were saying? Feng Jin could not help but sigh when he saw that she was still puzzled. "Yaoji, there's something you don't know. When Master Yuanjing took back the 3 cities and returned to Langyi County, he performed a divination for himself. He was destined to have 4 disciples. A few years ago, I heard that you had already accepted 3 disciples. I thought that with Lanting's talent, he would be the 4th disciple that you're looking for. I didn't expect that you already have one. In terms of students, all the students in Langyi Academy could be considered as Yuanjing students. However, there could only be 4 real disciples." This. Lu Heng's face was filled with disappointment. Although he belittled his cousin, he was still very proud of him. How could a student and a personal disciple be the same? For the former, Master Yuanjing only came out to give lectures occasionally, but for the latter, he taught everything he knew. "AI." Lu Heng sighed and then said somewhat open-mindedly, "If I get it, it's my fortune. If I don't, it's my fate. However, I heard from Huaiyu that Master Yuanjing was painstakingly looking for his 4th disciple. This is really puzzling." He emphasized the word diligently. Feng Jin thought for a while and suddenly remembered. "The person you're talking about is the one with an unknown birth date and a very bad fate." Lu Heng was confused. "What unknown birth date and a very bad fate?" Han Yu nodded and said, "That's him." Feng Jin was surprised. "That person has been studying in Langyi Academy for 7 or 8 years. If Master Yuanjing had accepted him earlier, he would have been his first disciple. Why didn't he accept him for 7 or 8 years and only accepted him when it was almost time?" Han Yu also asked his master about this question, and his master smiled meaningfully. "Timing." Han Yu said, "Master Yuanjing said that the timing was not right before, but now it is time." Feng Jin was speechless. Many famous teachers had quirks, and Master Yuanjing was definitely one of them. Lu Heng had to interrupt and asked, "After listening to you for so long, I still don't know who the lucky person is." Wei Xiai. After Master Yuanjing accepted him as a disciple, he named him Zixiao. Han Yu answered. "Wei Xiai? Wei Zixiao?" He had never heard of him. Lu Heng searched for relevant memories, but there was no trace of this person. Then, why did you say that his birth date is unknown and a very bad fate? Lu Heng had a bad habit. If he didn't understand, he would want to ask. If he didn't ask clearly, his heart would itch uncomfortably. Han Yu's expression froze. It seemed that he was having a hard time talking about it. Lu Heng thought that Han Yu had encountered a problem. His heart skipped a beat, and he quickly said, "I am presumptuous. Please forgive me, Wenbin." Han Yu shook his head and said softly, "There is no taboo. I'm just afraid that others will have unnecessary fear and scruples towards Zixiao if I say it. The people of the world are ignorant and fear ghosts and gods. Just a small date of birth can create so many tricks. It is really a pity for Zixiao. If it weren't for Wei Xi's good luck, He might have been strangled to death by his family and thrown into the wilderness when he was born. Lu Heng heard this and didn't continue to ask. If he had asked, Hanyu might have told him, but it was not a gentleman's behavior to join in the fun. Chapter 202. Although he didn't see Lu Lanting, who was praised by Feng Jin, Lu Heng had left a good impression on Hanyu. Hey, Fourth Lang Jun is back. Feng Jin and Hanyu came back together. They opened the curtain and saw a carriage parked in front of them. It was the carriage that Wuma Jun had taken during the day. What a coincidence! When Bin and I got off at the same time. Obviously, Wuma Jun had also noticed it. He was unhappy to see Feng Jin stepping on the stool and another person in the carriage. Wuma Jun didn't like Feng Jin's family background. Feng Jin wasn't a member of the royal family. Why did he have to live a better life than him? Why did he have to be more talented and outstanding than him? Although he was polite to Feng Jin on the surface, he didn't respect him that much. However, when Hanyu stepped on the stool and came out of the carriage, Wuma Jun's unhappiness disappeared instantly. He put on a faint smile, as if his previous carelessness and disgust didn't exist. Unfortunately, neither Feng Jin nor Hanyu were easy to deal with. To put it bluntly, among the three of them, except for Wuma Jun, whose acting skills were a bit bad, the other two were going to be best actors in the future. Before Wuma Jun could say anything, Feng Jin introduced Hanyu after greeting him. This is my good friend. His surname is Han, and his name is Yu. He is Master Yuanjing's disciple. Feng Jin emphasized the words, Master Yuanjing's disciple, hinting that Wuma Jun shouldn't be so embarrassed that he couldn't move when he saw beauty. Fortunately, Wuma Jun wasn't hopeless. He immediately withdrew his eager eyes and adopted a reserved plan. Taking a step back in order to advance, he could first establish a good relationship with them. Yes, in this era of masculinity, men might not be completely safe. Hanyu saw the eagerness in Wuma Jun's eyes. He felt a chill in his heart. The hair on his arm stood up, and he got goosebumps. He suddenly regretted agreeing to Feng Jin's request. Wuma Jun obviously didn't care about men and women. He didn't want to get himself involved. Thinking of this, Hanyu came up with a plan in his mind. He slowly revealed a sneer. However, in Wuma Jun's eyes, it was a stunning beauty who was satisfied with him. He had to admit that it was a big misunderstanding. It made Hanyu feel nauseous. Wuma Jun didn't like Feng Jin, but he didn't like Feng Jin being out of his control either, so he asked about his schedule. Feng Jin smiled faintly. He dealt with it flawlessly, and Wuma Jun could not find any mistakes. Fourth Lang Jun, have you made any progress in visiting the Lu residence today? How could Feng Jin not see that the other party was trying his best to hide it? If it wasn't for the fact that he still had some brains, he would have already flown into the sky. He must have encountered something good. Wuma Jun had already determined that Feng Jin had the intention of relying on him, so he did not hide anything from him. He revealed that Lu she had already relented and intended to betroth his daughter to him. Although she was only a concubine's daughter, she had a good father, money, and food. At the thought of Hu County, Wuma Jun's heart began to beat faster. It was as if he could already see Lu she helping him ascend the throne. When Feng Jin heard that, he almost dropped the cup in his hand and spilled some tea. Wuma Jun and Hanyu were quite surprised. It was normal for others to lose their composure, but how could Feng Jin lose his composure? Unbelievable. Hanyu smiled and closed his eyes to hide the surging speculation in his eyes. Could it be that the Lu family's daughter and Feng Jin had some unspeakable feelings for each other? Otherwise, according to Feng Jin's self-restraint, it was impossible for him to lose his composure so obviously. Wuma Jun did not think of that, and Feng Jin, the person involved, felt even more wronged. He just did not react for a moment and thought that Lu Shi had agreed to marry Lu Shi. Thinking about it, Jiang Pengji, who was such an unbearable person, married Wuma Jun like a daughter. He did not even dare to think about it. The scene was too beautiful. Feng Jin was shocked by his own speculation, and that was why he lost his composure. He quickly realized that the Lu family's daughter that Wuma Jun mentioned should be the concubine's daughter, put almost no presence in the Lu residence. If so, I have to congratulate 4th Lang Jun for getting his wish and bringing home the beauty. Feng Jin smiled frankly. There was no trace of hidden displeasure on his face, which made Han Yu, who was secretly observing him, confused again. However, I heard that the Lu family's daughter is not even 9 years old yet. When she is at the age of engagement, I am afraid that 4th Lang Jun will have to wait for a long time. Wuma Jun also knew his daughter's age, but did it matter? Not to mention that she was only 9 years old. Even if she was 9 months old, he would agree to the marriage. He did not have the capital to win over Lu Shi. That old fox was too cunning. He had tried to fool him for a few days, but he had been fooled by him. If he became Lu Shi's son-in-law, they would be in a natural alliance. Even if Lu Shi did not support him, he would not support anyone else. Moreover, she was Lu Shi's only daughter, so there was no reason for Lu Shi to not care about her. Ordinary princes did not have to lower themselves like Wuma Jun did. However, who asked him to be in an awkward position? If he did not find a way to fight for it, he would not be able to make a comeback for the rest of his life. It doesn't matter. I will just marry her and respect her. Yes, it didn't matter to Wuma Jun. He wanted to marry the daughter of Lu Shi, not that person. If he married her, he would worship her as a shrine. He could not stop him from being a playboy, not to mention that she was not married yet. Seeing his attitude, Feng Jin sneered in his heart. He thought that Jiang Pengji had seen through Wuma Jun's nature, who would feel at ease if their daughter married him. He had just reached an agreement with Lu Shi to be his son-in-law, and now he was coveting Wen Bin's beauty. What a scumbag. Wuma Jun wanted to talk to Han Yu through the night, but Han Yu's IQ and literature were much higher than his. There was nothing to talk about. I am surprised. Wuma Jun is so lustful. Why have I not seen him do anything to you after so many days of following him? Han Yu had nothing to talk about with Wuma Jun, but he had endless things to talk about with his good friend, Feng Jin, so they decided to share a room. Feng Jin said helplessly, "My beauty is like a jade pearl on a plate. How can I compete with Wen Bin's beauty?" Han Yu was speechless. It was not the Feng Jin he knew who would say such sarcastic words, who taught him to praise others in the open, but to insult others in the dark. Jiang Pengji thought that Feng Jin was being sarcastic. Was it her fault? Han Yu did not want to show any weakness. He teased. Wuma Jun mentioned that he was going to be engaged to the daughter of the Lu family. Why did you lose your composure? Chapter 203. Seeing that Feng Jin wanted to deny it, Han Yu pursed his lips and smiled. Don't play dumb, Huayu. How can you deny it? Feng Jin knew his friend's temperament. He knew that if he didn't give an explanation today, Han Yu wouldn't let him sleep all night. Feng Jin thought of a perfect excuse and explained calmly. A few days ago, I met Chief Lu by chance and knew that he was a gentle and generous elder. Do you think Chief Lu couldn't see through Wuma Jun's treacherous thoughts? If he'd seen through it, why did he agree to marry his daughter to Wuma Jun? This, to put it bluntly, isn't it like pushing his own blood relatives into the fire pit? Yes, both he and Feng Jin could see through Wuma Jun's disguise. There was no reason that someone like Chief Lu couldn't see through it. Moreover, Huayu had said that Chief Lu was a gentle and family-oriented person in private. How could he not care about his only daughter's marriage? So, that's why you lost your composure? Han Yu squinted his eyes. It seemed that he still had doubts about Feng Jin's words. Feng Jin said seriously. Otherwise, the daughter of the Lu family is not even 9 years old, and I will be married in 2 years. What kind of relationship could there be? Besides, the daughter of the Lu family has been raised in the boudoir since she was a child. She rarely goes out. Even her brother, Lanting, rarely sees her. How could I, a man outside, have any relationship with her? It's okay that you are a playboy, but how could you slander the innocence of a noble girl? Han Yu lost interest and sat on the side of the bed sulkily. He changed the topic and asked, if so, according to what Huayu said, why did Chief Lu do this? Feng Jin couldn't figure it out either, but he was secretly relieved. Han Yu was not easy to deal with. He would be finished if he gave himself away. Feng Jin shook his head in confusion. Well, I don't understand either. I think Chief Lu has other considerations. How could a man with a generous and family-oriented temperament, as well as extremely sharp judgment and experience, not see through Wuma Jun's clumsy disguise? It didn't make sense at all, unless there was a compelling reason that made Chief Lu act in this way. Han Yu's face was filled with the word interested, but Feng Jin was not curious at all. Whether Lu Shi married his daughter or not was his family's business. Why should two unrelated men get involved? As usual, Feng Jin read a book in front of the lamp for a while. When he felt a little sleepy, he decided to go to bed. As soon as he lay down, Han Yu said, "I hope it won't involve politics. County Chief Lu's methods are a little creepy." Feng Jin was secretly amused. County Chief Lu is such a character. If it's not for the sake of the imperial court, could it be for a personal grudge? What kind of logic was it to marry the son he had raised for a few years to Wu Ma Jun just because of a personal grudge? Han Yu couldn't figure out Lu Shi's intentions. Forget it. My head hurts if I think too much. The two of them talked about their daily lives and learned about the things that had happened to each other over the years. They couldn't help but sigh. All of a sudden, Han Yu remembered Master Yuanjing's worries. Mister has been rather worried recently. The aristocratic families have already flourished to such an extent. If we don't restrain ourselves, I'm afraid something bad will happen. Both of them were still awake and were chatting to pass the time. Feng Jin sneered. Rein in at the precipice? How could they do that? It wasn't that no one had realized this problem. The point was that the aristocratic families were like a carriage that was slipping down the slope, and they couldn't control it anymore. If the future ruler of the world is also a member of the aristocratic families, maybe we can continue our glory. But what if he isn't? Even if he is a member of the aristocratic families, who can tolerate the royal family being controlled by the aristocratic families? Or even lower than them? The aristocratic families have crossed the line. Han Yu was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect Feng Jin to have such a bold idea. However, Han Yu couldn't refute Feng Jin's words. Nowadays, the royal family of Dongqing was the Wuma family, but the real helmsman was the four aristocratic families. Which of the important positions in each province and county wasn't from the aristocratic families? How many children of poor families were there? Dongqing had always emphasized culture and restrained martial arts. Their military was weak, and almost all of them were lost in the battlefield in the north borderline. If the aristocratic families didn't agree, the emperor's order couldn't even be passed out of the Shangyang palace. Wasn't the royal family afraid of those aristocratic families? Afraid. Of course they were afraid. Who would feel comfortable if they had the world, but couldn't enjoy the supreme power? However, the royal family of Dongqing had gradually fallen into a disadvantageous position in the open and secret battle with the aristocratic families. They couldn't be majestic at all. Fortunately, the interests of the aristocratic families weren't united. Each had their own conflicts. The royal family of Dongqing was also in a strange balance. They were muddle-headed in front of the royal family and kept thinking about taking back the power. They kept playing dirty tricks. As the legitimate son of the Feng family, it was not easy for Feng Jin to see the drawbacks so clearly. I didn't think about it before, but after I came to Hejian and met County Chief Lu, I was suddenly enlightened. It was as if the fog in front of him was blown away by the wind, and he saw the truth. The chaos in Hu County was caused by natural disasters and sabotage, but the sabotage was greater than the natural disasters. Why did County Chief Lu persevere and even manage Hu County to its current state when others were troublesome and even lost their lives? While others were fawning over Lu Shi, few were willing to delve into the meaning of the problem. Was it because they didn't want to? Or was it because they didn't dare to? Lu Shi didn't exterminate the gentry in Hu County, and their lives weren't as easy as they used to be. They lived in fear and didn't dare to go overboard under Lu Shi's watch. But would that be enough to prevent future troubles? Not necessarily. County Chief Lu has been promoted to the General Evaluation Officer. I think there will be other changes. For example, he will be promoted to the governor on the surface, but in fact, it will be to take Hu County from him. Do you know how many people are drooling over Hu County? If Lu Shi is no longer the county chief, Or if he passes away and Hu County has a new governor, what do you think will happen to Hu County? Han Yu's mouth was dry. He didn't have to think to know the answer. Hu County was like a lamb that Lu she had carefully raised. It slowly grew up, became fat, and the wool on its body was thicker. Around it, there were countless greedy eyes staring at it. Once Lu Shi, the shepherd, was distracted or simply not around, the fat lamb would be plucked by the greedy demonic eye. Those who had a bit of foresight would probably keep the lamb and pluck it when it grew some hair. If the greedy people who couldn't wait for the wool to grow, they would probably kill the fat lamb. Han Yu said, in the end, County Chief Lu still cared about his identity as an aristocratic family, so he didn't kill all the aristocratic families to avoid future troubles. Their reason told them that it was best to kill all the aristocratic families, but they were all from aristocratic families. If the same problem was put in front of them, they would probably make the same decision as Lu Shi, or even a little softer. Han Yu frowned slightly. It seemed that he didn't like this heavy topic. What made him even more unhappy was that he knew he couldn't avoid this conflict in the future. Unless he was willing to give up all his knowledge and live in seclusion, no matter what happened outside. But was it possible? Chapter 204. Perhaps it was because he had something on his mind, he didn't fall asleep until the middle of the night. Then, he woke up on time according to his biological clock. The next day, seeing Wuma Jun, Feng Jin said, I'm afraid I can't stay in Hejian for more than 2 days. Wuma Jun was stunned. He didn't know how Feng Jin knew what he was thinking. Wasn't it simple? Wuma Jun stayed in Hejian to win the support of the aristocratic families. Now that he had the support of Lu Shi, the other aristocratic families didn't need to be so anxious. Instead of staying in Hejian County, it was better to visit the Wang family in Langyi. 4th Lang Jun, I hope you can make an exception and let me say goodbye to my friend Lanting and tell her that we will meet in Langyi in the future. Wuma Jun was happy to see that happen. He already regarded Lu Shi as his father-in-law, so Jiang Pengji was naturally his brother-in-law. Feng Jin was his right-hand man, so it was beneficial for Wuma Jun to build a good relationship with his future brother-in-law. Feng Jin and Han Yu saw all the changes in his emotions. Both of them felt disdain and contempt at the same time. They were not afraid of being stupid, but they were afraid of being stupid and blind. Wuma Jun had already regarded Feng Jin as an aide and a subordinate that he could order around. That was ridiculous. What did Wuma Jun do to deserve Feng Jin's loyalty? However, they didn't say anything. They just went out together. One wanted to say goodbye to his new friend, and the other wanted to see what the legendary Lu Lanting looked like. They were lucky that Jiang Pengji didn't run around, but if they came a little later, she would have gone out too. Han Yu got out of the carriage and was about to step on the stool when he saw a familiar figure standing next to Feng Jin. They were talking happily. Han Yu was speechless. His eyes fell on Jiang Pengji's feet, which were wearing socks and wooden clogs. The scene from a day before flashed in his mind. Jiang Pengji had already noticed him when Han Yu was looking at her. It wasn't that she had sharp eyes and ears, but the enthusiasm in the streaming room had almost blown the roof off. Nongfu Shangquan Yudiangshuan. I watched the streaming video on Baidu yesterday. I thought it was a pity, but I didn't expect to see him in person. I was so excited that I wanted to shake his hand. It must be very smooth. Jiang Pengji sneered in her heart when she saw the bullet screen. Even though she was watching a live stream, there was still a screen between them. Dream on. No. Host, give a handsome young man a close-up, magnified close-up. I want to take a screenshot and use it as a mural. He wasn't even dead yet, and they were already planning to hang him on the wall. Jiang Pengji ridiculed every bullet on the screen. She secretly glanced at Han Yu and found that he was also looking at her. Feet, Fei Shuang Dianimo, I'm a newbie in the live broadcast room. I heard that the streamer can see through a person's underwear at first sight. Then, do you know the size of this handsome young man? What is your 3 measurements? I think his fingers are so beautiful. They would be perfect for playing the piano. Jiang Pengji almost laughed when she saw the bullet screen. If the other party hadn't reminded her, she would have forgotten about it. Host V, This young man is indeed very good-looking, but if you think about the image of him taking off his pants to go to the toilet, or the image of him having constipation, I don't think he's so fairy-like. This kid has been suffering from excessive internal heat recently, and it's not good for his bowels. The audience in the live broadcast room. Jiang Pengji thought she could entertain herself by ruining other people's enjoyment of beauty. Host V. As for his size, I think the girl who has used him has the most right to speak. He's young, but he's already experienced a lot. He has 2 concubines who warm his bed. He's not messy, but he's not clean by the standards of your world. Jiang Pengji turned Han Yu's background upside down in the streaming room. Everyone looked at Han Yu and felt that he was a handsome, fairy-like young man. But when they saw the bullet screen that the streamer posted, they felt that it hurt their eyes. Streamer, why are you so cruel? Can't you just let them lick the handsome young man in peace? Xian, it hurts my eyes when I imagine the handsome young man squatting in the toilet with a conflicted face. Nongfu, Shangquan Yudiangshuan, hurts my eyes +1. The streamer is really a veteran in the field of teaching people tirelessly. Jiang Pengji could tease the audience in the live broadcast room, but it was impossible for her to say what she said before. If she had a grudge against Han Yu, she wouldn't be merciful with her words. But now it seemed that Feng Jin's friend obviously knew Han Yu, so she couldn't tease him rudely. Feng Jin noticed the weird atmosphere between Jiang Pengji and Han Yu, and a guess came to his mind. Could it be that the 2 of you have already met? Jiang Pengji laughed in her heart. Yes, more than just met. Han Yu also laughed secretly. What a small world. Before I entered the city yesterday, I met Lu Langjun and had a brief conversation with him. Feng Jin was overjoyed and said, I guess it's fate. Jiang Pengji laughed. Doomed fate. However, it was just the beginning. There were surprises everywhere in life. For example, when Feng Jin introduced Han Yu's courtesy name to her, Jiang Pengji was strangely silent. She stared at Han Yu, as if she wanted to see through the layers of clothes and see through him. Han Yu subconsciously took a step back and said reluctantly, Lu Langjun, is there something wrong with my appearance? No, it's very neat. Jiang Pengji added, Wenbin, do you know a man named Cheng Yumo? Jiang Pengji had never thought that the man her father recommended to marry into her family would appear in front of her. It was fate. Han Yu was confused and asked, Lu Langjun, have you heard of Yumo? Jiang Pengji didn't answer but asked back, So, Wei Zixiao does exist? Han Yu then realized that there was something wrong with Jiang Pengji's words. Lu Langjun has never heard of them. So how do you know about them? I once dreamed that there was a fairy in the Jasper Lake. There was a fairy beauty taking a bath and burning incense. I wanted to go closer to ask her, but I heard someone call her Zixiao. The beauty answered and called him Yumo. Hearing the voice, I knew that the fairy was a man. Jiang Pengji described it vividly as if she had really had the dream. Both Feng Jin and Han Yu were stunned. However, the audience in the streaming room couldn't buy it. After all, they already knew how bad Jiang Pengji was. They would never be fooled. Lao Cg Lianmeng. I feel sorry for the confused young Feng Jin and Han Yu. They have been tricked by the streamer. Nongfu Shangquan Yudiangshuan, sorry +1, who would call their partners by their full names. The loophole in Jiang Pengji's story was that she accurately called out Cheng Yumo and Wei Zixiao's surnames. If they really knew their names from a dream, they couldn't call each other by their full names, could they? So, it was possible to know their first names, but not their surnames. Chapter 205. If that's the case, you also saw me in your dreams? Han Yu asked with a faint smile. He looked friendly, but there was a hint of judgment in his eyes. Who would believe such nonsense? Yes, another loophole in Jiang Pengji's story was that there was another person in it, Han Yu. If you paid attention, you would notice that she asked Cheng Yumo and Wei Zixiao in surprise after hearing Han Yu's courtesy name. If the story was not contradictory, then Han Yu should have appeared in her dream. Otherwise, she must have made it up. Jiang Pengji thought that Han Yu would be ashamed, but he nodded. Yes, it's a pity that the dream was hazy. I could only see the silhouette, but not the face. I thought it was just a dream, but I didn't expect it to be real. The viewers in the streaming room were amazed by Jiang Pengji's acting skills. Jinxuan Kan Liang. I only admire the streamer's acting skills. She did it all in one take. It was such nonsense, but even she herself believed it. Life is like a drama. Even the streamer can win an Oscar if she depends on her acting skills. Qiufeng CC. Oscar is nothing. No matter how good the best actor and best actress are, can they be 100% in character all day? Nongfu Shanquan Yudiangshuan. Well, I know the streamer is lying, but she said it so confidently that I am beginning to doubt her. Even the viewers in the streaming room began to doubt their own judgment, let alone Han Yu, who didn't know much about her. Han Yu's mouth twitched. He said in a stiff tone, "So, it is fate that I met Lanting." Jiang Pengji readily accepted his advice and said, "Yes, such a fate. It will be a good story to tell." Feng Jin believed her and said with surprise, "People say that what you think about in the day is what you dream about at night." But Lanting was born and grew up in Hejing County. She had never heard of the names of Wenbin and the other two. Wei Zixiao's courtesy name was only recently given. Lanting could actually dream of such a scene. Maybe it was a sign of fate. If I go to Langyi in the future, I might be able to meet my dream friend. Han Yu was still doubtful, but he was more convinced after hearing what Feng Jin said. Although this speech was a little dreamy and romantic, it couldn't ignore the bigger picture. Let's rewind and take a look at what Jiang Pengji said. She saw a fairy beauty bathing and burning incense in the Jasper Lake. She wanted to go closer to ask, but she heard someone call her Zixiao. The beauty responded and called him friend Imo. In other words, the background was the bathtub. She was taking a bath. Han Yu couldn't imagine it. Zixiao was taking a bath in his dream. What was he doing in his dream? Although Lu, she was a boy, a young boy who had yet to grow up, and the scene in the dream was still hazy, she could only vaguely make out the silhouettes of people. She shouldn't be able to see anything out of place, but she still felt that it was a little strange. Jiang Pengji took advantage of the fact that her body was still young, so she asked Han Yu. That person called Yumo really has a good temper. He's cautious and thorough in his work. He's honest and upright. Han Yu was deep in thought and replied subconsciously, "Of course. Yumo has a good temperament, and he is cautious and reliable. Master speaks highly of him." When he finished, he came back to his senses. He was more and more convinced of what Jiang Pengji said in the dream. Why did he believe it? Chung Yumo was a nobody among all the students. He kept a low profile, and his presence was almost non-existent. Except for a few close friends who knew about his talent and temperament, other strangers didn't know much about Chung Yumo, let alone Jiang Pengji, who was far away in Hejing County. But she could accurately point out Yumo's temperament and his biggest advantage. It was obvious that there was a basis for it. Now Han Yu was interested in Jiang Pengji's dream. He couldn't care less about the little knot in his heart. So that Wei Zixiao, Jiang Pengji, suddenly smiled and asked, "Is he really as beautiful as a beautiful woman?" Han Yu was trying to listen to what she had to say, but he almost choked on his own saliva. He was being rude in front of others. Feng Jin was also speechless. Jiang Pengji looked like she was seriously asking for advice, which made it impossible for him to be annoyed. Han Yu said, "Didn't you say that you didn't see his face?" Jiang Pengji put on an "I'm very innocent" expression. "I didn't see his face, but I heard Wenbin tease him. He said that he accidentally left a sachet when he went out, and it was found by a merchant. He took the sachet and asked the matchmaker to propose marriage. I think if he wasn't much more beautiful than a woman, he wouldn't have been mistaken for his gender." Jiang Pengji was the one who was lying through her teeth. But it had been a lie for so long that most of the viewers in the streaming room believed it. Nongfu Shanquan Yudiangshuan. Haha, I don't know how traumatized he was when he was mistaken for a woman. Call Woody Yi. I've been watching the streaming for a few days. I realized that the men in this world are a bit effeminate. They have flowers in their hair and powder their hair. They are gentle and beautiful. If they look more androgynous, they will be easily mistaken for a man. The traumatized area should be infinite, right? Han Yu's white cheeks were a bit flushed. He seemed to be a bit nervous. You can't answer this question. If you see him one day and spill the beans, you will be the one to suffer. He shook his head decisively and kept the question a secret. But, Han Yu said, but what you said about Zixiao being teased in the dream might happen. But Zixiao doesn't like others to pay too much attention to his appearance. He always says that the appearance is given to him by his parents. Children can't choose whether they are beautiful or ugly. Isn't the essence of a skeleton? In this era, it was dangerous for a woman to be good-looking, but it was not necessarily safe for a man to be good-looking. A skeleton? Jiang Pengji smiled. This guy is interesting. How could he not be interesting? In this era, one's appearance affected one's fate as an official, and one's appearance was also an important criterion for being an official. But that guy said that appearance was not that important. Otherwise, he was just standing there and talking, pretending to be serious. Or he really thought so, and he was quite aware of it. Han Yu knew that Jiang Pengji would leave for Langyi in a few months. He smiled and said, if so, we will be classmates by then. But Lanting, you don't have to rush. You could go to Langyi in 3 or 4 months. Why? It was Feng Jin who asked. Han Yu said helplessly, why you? Did you forget that in 3 months, the students who pass the initial assessment will go to Shangjing for the final assessment? This year, there are many students who pass the preliminary assessment. Master Yuanjing may personally escort them to Shangjing. I remember that Lu County Chief is this year's General Assessment Officer. He'll also go to Shangjing. If Jiang Pengji went to Langyi according to the original schedule, half of the academy would be empty. The most important thing was that Master Yuanjing would not be there. She thought for a while and said, if so, I will go to Shangjing with my father. After the assessment, I will follow Master Yuanjing to Langyi. It will be on the way. Chapter 206. Feng Jin was visiting with his friends, so Jiang Pengji invited them to a banquet. She didn't go out to have fun, and the audience in the streaming room felt bored. They were used to the streamer style of making trouble every day, but she suddenly became so elegant and serious. They were not used to it. It would be fine if there was good food. They could treat the streaming as a food show. They couldn't eat it through the screen, but they could enjoy watching it. However, the food on the table that the maids served was very ordinary. It didn't arouse their appetite. Ko Wangdu. The development of food in this era is so backward. It feels like nothing. I don't have an appetite. Zhang Guazi. I thought I would see a dazzling dish like Little Master Boy, and I would have a flash of inspiration after eating it. It turns out that I was thinking too much. My Tao. We don't have to eat delicacies, but the streamer shouldn't make it so shabby, okay? Gaichong fan. It feels like a table of dishes in a small restaurant is better than the streamers. Jiang Pengji felt wronged. She couldn't control it. It was good enough to have something to eat. How could she be picky? She felt good now. She used to eat tasteless nutrient solution all day, but now she had a taste in her mouth. The audience in the streaming room kept complaining about the food. The dishes were monotonous, and the seasonings were lacking. How could a normal person eat it? Obviously, Feng Jin and Han Yu, as normal people, felt that the Lus were very attentive in terms of food. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, the maids took the table away. Jiang Pengji looked at Feng Jin and said, when does Wuma Jun plan to leave? There was a flash of surprise in Han Yu's eyes. If he remembered correctly, Feng Jin hadn't told him why he was here. If that was the case, how did this person know that Feng Jin was planning to leave? Feng Jin had experienced the same thing many times, so he was used to it. It should be tomorrow, if nothing goes wrong. Feng Jin knew too well about Wuma Jun's desire for quick success. Wuma Jun had already obtained Lu Shi's support, which was equivalent to having an inexhaustible supply of rice grains. In this era where food was more important than anything else, he would not panic if he had food in his hands. If he won the support of the Wang family of Langya and persuaded them to help him ascend the throne, the whole of Dongqing would be his. Jiang Pengji said sarcastically, so urgent? It seems that Wuma Langjun is also an impatient person. He can't wait. For the sake of one's life and future, it's normal to be a little impatient. Feng Jin didn't forget how many unknown forces they had encountered on their way to Hejin County. Not only did he not forget, but Wu Ma Jun, whose life had been hanging by a thread, also did not forget. If he didn't fight for the throne, he would die. From a prince's point of view, Wu Ma Jun's thoughts were understandable. Unfortunately, this person's vision was so narrow. So what if he ascended the throne? Would the 3 tribes of the north borderline give up their covetous eyes on Dongqing? Wouldn't the other 4 countries covet Dongqing? More importantly, did Wu Ma Jun have the ability to restrain the increasingly powerful and lawless family tycoons? Probably not. If he had such foresight, he would not have gone to the Wang consortium. Once he ascended to the throne with the help of the Wang family, the aristocratic families would have complete control over the royal family. Wu Ma Jun would only be a puppet emperor. If Dongqing wanted to continue the throne, they could not allow the aristocratic families to develop and expand unscrupulously. Feng Jin could not say these words, and he was not in the position to say them. He could only bury them deep in his heart. Although they were going to be separated the next day, neither Feng Jin nor Jiang Pengji were pretentious. They were still talking and laughing. It was just a temporary separation, not an eternal one. Without separation, how could there be the joy of meeting an old friend in a foreign land? On the way back, Han Yu looked at Feng Jin thoughtfully and said, "Huai Yu is very unhappy." Feng Jin closed his eyes. The situation is getting worse and worse. I really don't know how many times such a situation will happen. Han Yu was puzzled. He did not know where Feng Jin's worry came from. If the world is in chaos, Huai Yu can show his talents. Judging from Lu Langjun, he is not an ordinary person. Maybe in the future, you can have a friendship with him. Of course, if the 2 of them were to assist their respective kings, then they could only do their own things. Feng Jin heard that, and the corner of his mouth twitched. He felt that Han Yu and Jiang Pengji were on the same side. Both of them had restless temperaments and loved to stir up trouble at the drop of a hat. Although the royal family of Dongqing was declining, it was not destroyed yet. Now they were thinking about chaos. How could the royal family endure it? It could be seen that in the eyes of the aristocratic families, the royal family of Dongqing did not live up to its name. With a soft sigh, he dissipated into the air and disappeared. The next day, Jiang Pengji got up early and went to the Fengyu Pavilion outside the city to bid farewell to Feng Jin. The weather had started to warm up, but there was a cold wind blowing from time to time, making people's clothes rustle. Looking at Feng Jin's back, Jiang Pengji, who was originally emotionless, felt a little emotional. When will we meet again? She did not know whether they would be enemies or friends the next time they met. Jiang Pengji kept her emotions in check. She put a finger to her lips and whistled. Wai was already running towards her. "Let's go." She got on the horse and held the reins with both hands. The carriages in the distance had become a small, and Feng Jin was nowhere to be seen. White snorted and galloped toward the city gate. Ever since the attack on the Mengs, Jiang Pengji liked the feeling of galloping more and more. Second Langjun, the people from the carpentry workshop are here. They are waiting for you in the mansion. As soon as they got back, the gatekeeper came forward to take the reins. Jiang Pengji's expression was cold and displeased at first, but when she heard that someone from the carpentry workshop was here, her eyes suddenly lit up. It was as if there were the brightest stars in them, which made people happy. Someone from the carpentry workshop? Where are they now? Take me there. Feng Jin was the first friend Jiang Pengji had made in this world, so he meant something to her. She did not show it on her face or say it, but she was still reluctant to leave Hejin County. However, compared to the big picture, these small sentiments were insignificant. The gatekeeper was also smiling and bowed. He's waiting for you in the mansion. Don't worry, Second Langjun. Jiang Pengji did not listen to the gatekeeper. She walked like the wind, and the maids made way for her. To save time, she said, "You don't have to greet me. Go to your own things." She opened the door quickly, but not rudely. A few craftsmen in linen clothes had been kneeling for a long time. "No need for small talk. Just tell me how is the crossbow I asked you to make." Jiang Pengji sat down without hesitation and skipped the complicated etiquette of the craftsman. They looked at each other, and one of the craftsmen spoke on behalf of the craftsman. It's a success. Chapter 207. Under normal circumstances, Jiang Pengji's streaming time was fixed. She would start streaming in the morning after waking up and washing up. She would stop streaming after dinner at night. If there were other special streaming tasks, she would adjust the streaming time according to the situation. It was the normal streaming time, and the streaming room was already filled with 10,000 viewers. Occasionally, someone would leave the room out of boredom, but another viewer would immediately fill in. Every trap in the streaming room depended on one's internet speed, hand speed, and luck. Chi-yun, compared to those innocent female protagonists in dramas, I like the streamer more, especially when her eyes lit up just now. Really, it felt like she was electrified. That indescribable throbbing, as if she was electrified. Pianxian Jiaowu. I think that feeling should be hot-blooded, right? When Jiang Pengji's eyes lit up, the viewers in the streaming room always felt that it should be accompanied by aggressive and passionate background music. In an instant, it could stir up people's blood and make their pores open wide. Quick, let me have a look. Jiang Pengji was born in an era where weapons of war were extremely advanced. She had even piloted and commanded aircraft carriers, let alone other portable weapons. It could be said that unless she was in a more advanced interstellar civilization, there was no weapon that could amaze her. Obviously, such a thing could not exist in this extremely backward and conservative society. Of course, she did not need it. In this ancient era, as long as she had a weapon that was more advanced than the average, she would have a higher chance of winning in terms of hardware. Why use a butcher's knife to kill a chicken? It was a bold attempt to get the craftsmen in the carpentry room to research the improved crossbow. Because of Jiang Pengji's order, the craftsmen put in a lot of effort to research it day and night. How could they dare to neglect it? Seeing that she was so excited, they secretly heaved a sigh of relief in their hearts. After presenting the latest product, the craftsman carefully watched Jiang Pengji take it, afraid that she would accidentally hurt herself. Jiang Pengji's smile disappeared, and she seriously fiddled with the slightly rough finished crossbow. The crossbow was bigger than she expected. The body of the bow was 3 feet and 3 inches long, and the bowstring was 2 feet and 5 inches long. The body of the bow was dyed dark brown, and one could smell the strong smell of paint when they got close to it. It was quite heavy in her hands, but it was not too heavy, and it was convenient to carry around. The craftsman had to figure out the materials for the overall structure, and Jiang Pengji only provided them with data. To be able to produce a finished product in such a short period of time, regardless of the final results of the experiment, this attitude was worthy of praise. Next to the finished crossbow were a dozen or so arrows of different shapes and painted black. They were very different from ordinary arrows. Most of the arrowheads had blood grooves engraved on them, and some of them even had up to 10. If the arrowheads pierced into the target, it was easy to imagine that they would dig deep into the flesh near the wound. Even if they were pulled out, they would pull out a large piece of flesh, making it seem rather cruel. But she liked it very much. These were the special arrows that she had designed based on the overall data of the crossbow. They were specially designed for this kind of composite crossbow. Each of them had their own advantages and were suitable for different terrains and environments. The length of the crossbow could be adjusted, and different arrows could be used to achieve different shooting ranges. The sighting device could also be disassembled. Because the damage rate was high, a disassembled sighting device could reduce the damage. However, these changes also increased the difficulty of materials and attacks. When Jiang Pengji designed the improved crossbow, she referred to many historical documents and the weapons in service in the military. If everything met her data standards, the range and penetrative power would be extremely terrifying. There were also a few military enthusiasts in the streaming room. When they saw the blood grooves on the arrowheads, their scalps went numb. Major General Wang Yin, "Oh my God, if this thing is shot into the flesh, it will take a lot of skin and bones to pull out." Ko Wangdu. "It hurts just looking at it. The streamer made such a cruel thing. It's too scary." Zhangguazi. "The crossbow in a streamer's hand is different from the ones I've seen before." The craftsman watched Jiang Pengji fiddle around with the crossbow without any change in her expression. They could not help but feel anxious. Was she satisfied, or was she not satisfied? While they were feeling anxious, Jiang Pengji put down the slightly large crossbow and asked, "Have you tried it?" The craftsmen shook their heads and lowered their heads. They were trembling with fear. "We were afraid that you would be too impatient, so we each took charge of a part of the crossbow. After a few experiments and searching for suitable materials, we did not let you down. After the initial model of the crossbow was completed, we rushed to send it over." That being said, the craftsmen were still very confident in the finished products they made. They tested countless materials and each took charge of a part of the crossbow. The materials they found all matched the data given by Jiang Pengji. "Each of you took charge of a part of the crossbow? That's smart. It's a very time-saving method." Yes, if they did not divide the work, they would not have been able to produce the semi-finished product so quickly. Yes, in Jiang Pengji's eyes, it was a semi-finished product. There were still many inadequacies, but they were not major problems. Because of that, she had a preliminary understanding and a good impression of the craftsman's wisdom in that era. Although the technology was extremely backward and the social atmosphere was conservative, it was undeniable that they were not stupid. They had the heart to explore. Jiang Pengji's design was very detailed. Every part of the crossbow was provided with reference data. Skilled craftsmen will be able to figure it out by experimenting. However, these craftsmen knew how to divide the work, which maximized efficiency and saved time. They were worth teaching. I'm flattered. If it wasn't for the detailed design, I wouldn't have been able to produce this thing even if I had 10 times the time. The craftsmen did not dare to take charge. Instead, they fawned over Jiang Pengji with fear. She smiled and said brightly, "Why are you so reserved? I'm not the kind of person who can't stand other people's glory. If it's your work, then it's your work. You don't have to be so careful. You did a good job this time, but there are still many flaws that need to be improved." The craftsman felt relieved and secretly wiped the sweat off his forehead. It seemed that they had passed the test. The carpentry workshop was not an outstanding business under the Lus. The craftsmen were eager to be put in an important position. They did not want to repeat the boring and unskilled work all day long. Even if they were craftsmen, there was a hierarchy among them. Everyone had their own goals. Ever since they received the task from their Lang Jun, they had been working hard. If they did a good job this time, they would not be valued in the future. With that in mind, they mustered up all their energy and worked overtime just to attract Jiang Pengji's attention. Now that they looked at it, they had accomplished half of their goal. "Leave this crossbow. I'll test it and see where it's lacking. Then you can fix it accordingly," Jiang Pengji said. The materials used for the crossbow, the craftsmanship, and the original design are all confidential. You can't tell anyone, including your family. Chapter 208. There were also crossbows in this era, and they had been developed several times. However, they had many drawbacks. The shooting range was short, the crossbow was heavy, and it was inconvenient to carry. It also had certain requirements on the environment, or else it would be hard to maintain. The overall production process and cost were also high. Due to various reasons, only a small number of people could afford to use these crossbows, and they were not widely used. Even if they were, Jiang Pengji would not like them. She played with the semi-finished crossbow in her hand. The crossbow arm, crossbow bow, bowstring, and crossbow mechanism barely matched the data given by her. After her improvement, the time needed to load the arrows was greatly reduced, which also improved the mobility and flexibility of the crossbow. I don't know the cost of the finished crossbow and the production time. If the cost is high and the production time is long, it is impossible to produce it on a large scale with the current manpower in the carpentry workshop. What's more, it is a secret that needs to be kept. I can't let more craftsmen participate in the production. Jiang Pengji pouted and frowned. She was not satisfied with the current situation. However, she did not have many people working for her now. Even if she equipped each of them with a modified crossbow, she should be able to afford it according to her family's wealth. To prevent the crossbow from attracting attention, Jiang Pengji wrapped it in a white cloth and left the Lu's house with a dozen arrows of different models. To the farm. The Lu's house was not suitable for testing the improved crossbow. It was not that she was afraid that the servants would leak the secret, nor was she worried that she would accidentally hurt others. It was just that the mansion did not have a spacious place suitable for testing. According to her calculation, the shooting range of the improved crossbow was a bit far. She did not ride a horse this time. She sat in the carriage and asked the groom to drive her there. With the help of Meng Han, the training of the troops was officially on track, and the effect was much more significant than before. After she got off the carriage, she saw a group of shirtless troops carrying a 3-foot-long log on their shoulders running past her step by step. At the end of the line was the petite Nongqin. She was also dressed in brown. She was sweaty and her lips were pale. Nongqin had obviously seen her. Her eyes were slightly twinkling, and she became more stubborn. Jiang Pengji curled her lips slightly. When she passed by, she heard her voice. If you're tired, you can stop and rest for a while. After all, you are a weak woman. She emphasized the word weak. Hearing this, Nongqin opened her eyes wide. However, after a moment, she gritted her teeth and ran past her with her head down. Her footsteps were heavy and slow. The cloth on her shoulder was worn through by the log, and her skin was bleeding. She looked very miserable. Seeing that, Jiang Pengji chuckled. Adjust your breathing and keep up with them. I'll wait for you at the drill ground. Hearing her words, Nongqin took a deep breath. Her footsteps became firmer, and she looked better than before. Meng Han had been following them and did not allow anyone to slack off. When he saw Jiang Pengji, he quickly stepped forward and saluted. Greetings, Langjun. You don't have to be so polite. I came here today because I have something to do. Tell them to go to the drill ground and wait after training. At that moment, Meng Han noticed that Jiang Pengji was holding a strange object wrapped in white cloth. It was shaped like a bow. Before he could guess, Jiang Pengji asked, "How is Nongqin's training these 2 days?" Meng Han said subconsciously, "Although she is a woman, she has amazing perseverance. I've taught some of the soldiers in the troop a lesson, but Nongqin seems to have something on her mind. She doesn't communicate with others. She still practices hard after training." If it was a man who was so eager to learn, Meng Han would only feel gratified and praise him as a hero. But Nongqin was a woman, and her determination to learn was stronger than that of a man. He could not help but admire her. After she came, someone must have said something bad in private. Jiang Pengji sneered and said calmly, "Nothing more than some derogatory words. Nongqin has been through a lot, and her character has been shaped. It's a good thing that she practices hard. At least she doesn't cry." In Jiang Pengji's view, crying was a cowardly behavior second only to suicide. It was not worth advocating. Could crying solve anything? No, this would only encourage the perpetrator's arrogance and make him suffer even more. Nongqin was ridiculed and humiliated by others. She chose to immerse herself in practicing hard in order to get back at them instead of crying. This was a great improvement. Meng Han looked a little embarrassed. The people of Dongqing were open-minded, but in many people's minds, women should be related to needlework. Why did she have to train and do rough work like a man? Her skin was soft and tender, and her arms were as thin as bamboo poles. What strength could she have? After Nongqin came out of nowhere, there was indeed a lot of criticism. There were also those who liked to talk dirty. Nongqin's face turned red and white. Meng Han could say something when he saw it, but he could not protect her all the time. There were times when he could not take care of her. He said in a muffled voice, "I'm useless." Jiang Pengji sneered and said calmly, "What does it have to do with you? Nongqin trained hard, and she will get back at herself. She doesn't need you to apologize. If you want to be recognized by others, you can only rely on your own strength. So what if you are a woman? Here, only fists matter. If you are too protective of her, it will only make others ignore her hard work. Just watch her. As long as she doesn't go too far, you don't have to care about other things. When Nongqin beat up everyone who looked down on her, who would dare to look down on her? If they still looked down on her, she would beat them twice. The troop was a place where fists mattered. Gender didn't matter at all. If gender mattered, then a man who lost to a woman was not even as good as a weak woman. If he could not even beat a woman, what was the point of training? He could just go home and pick up an embroidery needle and learn how to do needlework. TSK, a group of people who were itching for a beating. They all needed to be taught a lesson. When they arrived at the drill ground, Jiang Pengji saw Nongqin standing outside the crowd from afar. Her face was tense, and her sweat was covered with dust. Her eyes were sharp and guarded. A man tried to talk to her, but he could not speak because of her cold stare. Seeing that, Jiang Pengji went forward and said, "Do you see the archery target in the distance?" The area was used as a drill ground. Although the facilities were simple, it was large and convenient for training. When she asked questions, many answered sparsely. Only Nongqin's voice was loud and firm. "I see it." Jiang Pengji looked at the men who had grown stronger but were still a little undisciplined. Then she looked at Nongqin, whose face had become thinner. Chapter 209. Not only was Nongqin dumbfounded, but the other men were also speechless. The live streaming room was in an uproar. Xuanxiang Taisho, "Host, don't scare me. How can I hit the target from so far away?" Fengji Liaoyuan, "I believe the host can do it, but Nongqin can't do it, right?" Han Yutong, "I can see another girl who is about to evolve into a tough man." The audience in the live streaming room presented facts and reasoned that the possibility of Nongqin doing it was zero. It was not that they didn't believe it, but it was too unbelievable. Ming Hun thought so too. With his eyesight, Jiang Pengji was at least 200 steps away from the target. Even a heavy bow of 1 pickle could not reach that distance. She needed a bow of more than 2 pickle. But 2 pickle, that was 200 kilograms, which was much heavier than an adult man. How could a weak girl like Nongqin draw a bow of 2 pickle? "Can you do it?" Jiang Pengji asked her. Nongqin was hesitant, but she made up her mind when she heard Jiang Pengji's question. "Lang Jun, I can do it for you if you teach me." Jiang Pengji smiled. "Smart girl, come here. I'll teach you." She untied the white cloth that wrapped the improved crossbow in her hand, and it fell to the ground, revealing the crossbow. Meng Hun was stunned when he saw it. However, what surprised everyone was yet to come. Jiang Pengji whispered in Nongqin's ear, telling her how to use the improved crossbow. This crossbow has a strong recoil. When you use it, you must stabilize your lower body and learn how to release the force. If your lower body is not stable, the crossbow in your hand will deviate a little, which will cause you to miss the target. If the enemy doesn't die, you will. Jiang Pengji's voice was like a clear spring in the mountains, with a refreshing coldness that made people subconsciously focus their attention. Although the improved crossbow had a buffer and shock absorber, it could greatly reduce the instantaneous force of the arrow. However, this strength was still a bit strenuous for Nongqin now. You have enough time to aim at the target with the sighting device and balance your body. You don't have to be like a bow and arrow. You can't keep the bow and arrow open for a long time after pulling it back. Jiang Pengji helped Nongqin adjust herself and said with encouragement, "This is the right angle." As soon as she finished her words, an arrow flew out of the crossbow. Even though Nongqin was mentally prepared, she was still shaken by the strong recoil. She staggered and fell to the ground. Before she could get up, her ears were filled with exclamations. Nongqin was very lucky. Although the arrow didn't hit the bullseye, it still hit the target and cracked half of it. The viewers in the live stream all sent a string of exclamation marks. They seemed to be quite shocked. This distance was already more than 200 steps. Not to mention whether ordinary people could aim at something that far away, just the requirement of arm strength was enough to scare off a large number of people. However, right in front of everyone's eyes, it was actually shot through by a thin and frail woman. and it even blew up. The arrow didn't stop because of that. Instead, it flew for dozens of steps before it pierced into the ground. Seeing that, Meng Hun rushed forward and picked up the improved crossbow that Nongqin had thrown on the ground like a treasure. Nongqin was also stunned. She saw a fair and clean hand with a fragrance of soap in front of her. "Get up." Nongqin bit her lips, pulled Jiang Pengji's hand, and suddenly stood up. She hurried forward to check on the target, and was also shocked by the violent scene. Was this really done by her? Nongqin blacked out, and her heart raced. She raised her hands in disbelief. Was this really done by her? People often describe a marksman as a sharpshooter, but she turned around to have a look. The distance between them was more than 100 steps. Meng Hun was the chief coach and the former county chief of the Mengs. Naturally, he could see how terrifying the improved crossbow was. He had seen crossbows before, but compared with the ones he had seen before, the one in front of him seemed especially terrifying. It was very light, and anyone with a little bit of strength could carry it. Besides, it could be pulled with the strength of the waist. Even a girl like Nongqin could use both her hands and feet, lean back, and gather all her strength to pull the string and put on the trigger. It was like a foot-mounted crossbow, using the strength of the arms, feet, and waist. However, the foot-mounted crossbow was different. The improved crossbow was a crossbow with arms, which was very convenient to carry and move. What made Meng Hun's eyes brighten was that the recoil was very small, but the shooting range was really long. However, before he could finish his joy, he heard Jiang Pengji's cold words. "Still not enough? A semi-finished product is still a semi-finished product." Meng Hun held the improved crossbow in his hands and looked confused. Still not enough? He didn't know that Jiang Pengji's words contained a lot of information. She had a pair of sharp eyes. Nongqin had only tested it once, but she had already seen several areas that needed to be improved. Does Lang Jun want to equip everyone with this kind of crossbow? Meng Hun suppressed the excitement in his heart. He couldn't wait to worship the improved crossbow in his hands. When the others heard Meng Hun's words, especially the subordinates that Meng Hun brought with him, their eyes lit up. Jiang Pengji said, "It's still a semi-finished product, and it needs to be further improved. Because it's difficult to make and the cost is high, I can't make one for each person. I will only give it to the best." As for the others, she took the improved crossbow from Meng Hun's hands and pulled the string with her arms skillfully, unlike Nongqin. Bang! An arrow target exploded from the center. Jiang Pengji's body was as steady as a pine tree. She didn't even shake a bit. She continued to pull the string and load the arrow. There was another sound of the arrow target exploding. It was completely broken. Meng Hun just realized that Jiang Pengji didn't aim at all. Or in other words, when she looked at the target, she already knew that she could hit the target without deliberately aiming. What kind of terrifying eyesight and accuracy was that? In this world, there's nothing that can't be done. The reason why I can't do it is because I don't know how to do it. She put down the crossbow and looked back with a bright smile. At that moment, it was as if the sun in the sky was overshadowed by her smile. Nongqin felt hot in her heart. Her eyes were burning, as if there was an inexplicable force filling her limbs. She wanted to be like her Lang Jun. She pulled the string lightly. Her body was as still as a pine tree, and her back was straight and unbent. It was as if she couldn't give in even if the sky collapsed. Yes, she was a woman, but so was her Lang Jun, who was younger than her. If she could do it, why couldn't she? Even if her current life was very difficult and the endless training made her physically and mentally exhausted, she felt very free and carefree. She couldn't imagine going back to her old life, and she didn't want to be forced to marry by her parents. She didn't want to live a mediocre life around a mediocre man, a group of noisy radishes, and a stove. Those muddle-headed, uneventful days had worn her numb. Could that be considered living? Strong thoughts filled Nongqin's mind, and she was obsessed. Chapter 2:10. Nongqin looked at Jiang Pengji firmly and knelt down. The wound on her shoulder was still bleeding and stained her clothes. "Lang Jun, please teach me." Jiang Pengji looked at Nongqin with a faint smile. Nongqin felt uncomfortable under her gaze. After a long time, she said, "What do you think I can teach you?" Nongqin was stunned. She didn't understand what she meant. Jiang Pingji said, "You practice hard, you work hard, and you don't want to admit defeat. That's enough. What I can teach you is how to maximize your advantages and make your body stronger. You have to rely on yourself for the rest." Women were at a disadvantage because of their physical structure, but it didn't mean that women were weak. In Jiang Pengji's world, the Federal Army was roughly divided into 14 corps. The corps commander was the highest commanding officer and was directly under the command of the commander-in-chief. Each corps had different responsibilities. For example, the 7th Corps led by Jiang Pengji belonged to the first echelon. It could be said that apart from the commander-in-chief, the corps commander was the most powerful person. In Jiang Pengji's generation, there were 8 female corps commanders and 6 male corps commanders. In the Federation, the strong were respected, regardless of gender. Who could say that the corps commanders were weaker than the 6 male corps commanders because they were female? In fact, Jiang Pengji's personal combat ability could be ranked in the top 3 among the corps commanders. Physical structure wasn't absolute. It all depended on whether one had the desire to be strong. If others are stronger than you, then you have to learn how to attack faster. If others are faster than you, then you have to learn how to kill them with one blow. If others are stronger than you, then you have to learn the art of war and how to lead troops to war. You should never focus on your own shortcomings. You don't have to compare your shortcomings with others' strengths. It's not necessary. Every word Jiang Pengji said made Nongqin's heart pound uncontrollably, as if something was about to break out of her cocoon. She said, "Get up. You came to me to teach you something. I should teach you something." Nongqin stood up. Her knees were covered in dust. "I will come to the farm every day for a while. It's up to you what you can learn." Jiang Pengji raised her hands and pinched Nongqin's limbs. She said seriously, "The condition of your muscles and bones is fine. Is there a massage after training?" The massage list given by Jiang Pengji was not simple. It was prepared for military school students. It could maximize the effect of training, stimulate muscle nerve activity, and reduce the sequelae of the previous day's training. It could achieve twice the result with half the effort. After accumulating for a long time, those who were slightly younger would be able to further develop their bodies, effectively improving their physical qualities. Nongqin blushed and said in a low voice, "Yes, the head coach saw that I was suffering from training, so he asked the ant in the farm to learn to help me." Although the kind of full-body massage was very embarrassing, the effect was indeed very obvious. His muscles were sore and swollen, and he felt like he had soaked in a hot bath. She thought that she would be too tired to get up the next day, but unexpectedly, after a good night's sleep, her limbs were only slightly sore. This level of fatigue did not affect his training at all. Jiang Pengji chuckled and praised him. "Meng Hun is very attentive. Go and treat the wound on your shoulder and apply some medicine." Nongqin replied respectfully, "In another half a month, it's going to be the corporal selection, right?" Jiang Pengji looked at the rules and regulations she had set. Indeed, there would be a selection of sergeants once a month. Meng Hun said, "Yes, Langjun. Nongqin is also participating. Spread the word that whoever loses to her will have to wash the clothes of the troops." Meng Hun opened his mouth and asked, although Nongqin is working hard, if she wants to win. She was at a disadvantage in terms of body size. Jiang Pengji said meaningfully, "It's not impossible. No one knew better than her how to kill a person in the shortest time. Even if she was at a disadvantage, she could still take the enemy's life. Since she was teaching Nongqin, how could she not teach her something practical?" Meng Hun felt a chill down his spine. He subconsciously felt that something was wrong, but he could not tell why. Song Prefecture was one of the 6 prefectures and 21 counties in Dongqing. The trade route to the north was smooth, and it was closely connected to the northern borderline. The two places exchanged goods, which attracted many merchants to do business there. Thus, the local economy was booming, and Song Prefecture became the largest prefecture in Dongqing. However, that prosperity was gone forever. Today, Song Prefecture was filled with depression and decadence. From time to time, roving bandits would rob merchants. The once bustling trade route was no longer what it used to be. A few shabbily dressed people sat by the roadside. Occasionally, rows of soldiers in the Meng family's uniform could be seen patrolling the streets with guns in their hands. They looked solemn as they interrogated suspicious people who were in a hurry. They secretly embezzled money, bullied and humiliated the people, seized the goods of merchants, and took the opportunity to extort money. The checkpoints in and out of Tsang Prefecture, especially in Meng County, were heavily guarded. Because of the bandits killing and robbing, the people had to leave their homes and stay at the city gate. They were in groups of 2 or 3. Their clothes were old and tattered, and they were emaciated. Their eyes were numb. These damn beasts! A white-haired old beggar covered his face and sobbed as he avoided the soldiers. He was holding a skinny child in his arms. Upon closer inspection, the child's face was pale. There were a few bruises on his face. His eyes were closed, and he had stopped breathing. The little beggar was picked up by the old beggar. He had been raised since he could speak until he was 12 years old. The old beggar thought that he would have someone to rely on for the rest of his life. Unexpectedly, his grandson was hungry and went out to beg. He accidentally dirted the shoes of a Meng family soldier and was beaten to death by him. How could this be the guardian of Dongxing and the people? They were obviously a group of jackals, wolves, tigers, and leopards in human skin. They were evil spirits from hell. "What are you scolding, you old bastard?" A soldier with sharp ears heard some noise and walked forward while cursing. The old beggar decided to go all out. He spat at the soldier and said, "I'm scolding you bastards." After a while, there was a pool of blood on the roadside. An old beggar with several holes in his body was lying next to the body of a little beggar. The refugees at the side were already numb. Their eyes were like wooden beads. They didn't move at all, just like wooden statues. At this moment, the crisp sound of horse hooves could be heard from outside the city gate. The originally arrogant guards were like mice that met a cat. They became flattering and respectful, nodding and bowing. The person on the horse ignored the chaotic people and directly galloped into the city. "I have something to report to the county chief. Pass the message quickly." You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.